T-minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
All right, guys. Like always, I appreciate everybody's out here listening to us. I got a really exciting one for us this week. We have Warren Booth and Rich Ihle. He's one of the guys I bought one of my first boas from, so very excited about this. But let's get it rolling like we always do. Let's talk about US ARC. Guys, like always, getting to the end of the year. It's a great Christmas present for somebody. Gold membership for the US ARC. Like I said, there's not as many people as you think out there with a membership. Help any way you can. I know we got a lot of really big things planned this year. We're going to start showing how much money we're raising. I'm really looking forward to 2025. Next thing coming up, Super Show. Get out there. If you haven't got your plane tickets, take advantage. Don't know if I'm going yet. You know me, I'm a last minute kind of guy, but there's an outside chance you see me, but you'll know if you know. But like I said, don't miss that show. It's one of my favorites. Let's get it rolling, guys. So again, Rich, Warren, both you guys, I appreciate you being here. Rich, this is the part where I'm going to flatter you. So again, when I got into the hobby in 2002, I obsessed over boa constrictors. I got my first boa when I was around 8 years old. I got another one in my teens. And when I discovered mutations and just everything was going on in the breeding community, you were one of my go-to guys. I always kept up on your litter reports on your salmonboa.com page. And, I mentioned before we got started today, but I saved my first invoice from you back in the day for my Salmon Boa. So just happened to have this. Yeah, and here I found my only Polaroid I ever took of the guy. I got him as a baby from you, and that doesn't really make it look as good as it did. It was much nicer in person. So yeah, like I said, having you out here is a bucket list for me, man. So I'm actually really looking forward to this conversation.
Well, I'm honored.
Yeah, appreciate you. So, one of the things that really was a turning point for you in this hobby that I remember was the discovering of the salmon Hypo in a pet store. I always really enjoyed hearing that story. Would you be willing to tell that one?
Well, sure. We had the store Arizona Reptile Center, and I bought a boa that was very dark colored. And we weren't sure where it was from. I called it the unidentified boa. And I sent a photo to Dave Barker and got his opinion on what he thought it was. And he felt it was maybe from Panama. And so I sold the boa and to a gentleman. And then about a year later, he was starting a kung fu studio or something, and I bought it back. And then I sold it to a girl in Cottonwood, and she really liked it. And it was a nice boa. It was real dark and interesting. It kind of had reddish eyes. And she had babies one day, and she called me and she said, "Hey, I got babies. Are you interested?" And I said, "Yeah, She says, "Some of them are really pretty." So she brought them down to show me, and there were, if I remember right, there was maybe 4 that had a very hypo look that just stood out, that were just, totally different. And I thought, man, we were selling baby boas for about $125. And so I put those 4 boas up for like $350. I didn't want to sell them. And I had a partner involved, so I didn't have full say, but we decided to sell them. And Loyal Clark was helping me manage the store. And I was gone, and I kept thinking about those boas. And I called him up and I told him, "Don't sell any of those boas." And he said, "I just sold one yesterday." And I go, "Shoot." So anyway, a guy locally here got one of them. And I decided to raise them up. And then the next year, the lady had another litter of boas, and I told her I'll buy all of them. So I bought all the baby boas, and there was maybe 7 or 8 that were the hypo look, and really enjoyed the way they looked. And in the shop, we just called them salmon boas. And then I told her I wanted to buy the female. So I was actually able to end up buying the female as well. And started growing those animals up. And Gordon Schuett, close friend, and he looked at him. He goes, "Rich, this is something really special here. You should really work on this project." And so I decided to hold everything back and raise them up and start to breed them. And sure enough, I got some really good results. And Gordon said, "You know what? We need to track all the results and then publish a paper on it." And so we did. I had Bill Montgomery come and take photos, and Gordon and I put a paper together, and it was accepted in the Journal of Heredity, the International Journal, and I termed the boas as salmon boas, and they blessed the paper and they published it, and that was a really big deal. And I kept on breeding them, and there were so many different looks, and then finally bred a salmon to a salmon, and boy, those animals just came out. The super salmons were just stunning. I mean, they were just didn't have a speck on them of black. Some of the super salmons, when you have the hypo gene, the last black to leave the animal is the mustache, black mustache on the boa. And a lot of the super salmons, they maybe had a third of a mustache or half a mustache. And then some of the really, really super ones they had no mustache. And I remember taking them to Florida. I used to go to all the Florida shows and shipping them down there and everything. And they were really well received. And it was the start of the whole thing.
I love that story because you had the snake in your hands.
I know.
And then you sold it.
Yeah.
And then it came back again. And then
Yeah.
you sold it again.
Yeah.
And then you finally got it back again.
Yeah. It's yeah. And after through the years of realizing what the animal looked like, I had another friend of mine that Gordon introduced me to is Dr. Dave Hardy. And Dr. Hardy, he had hunted quite a bit in Panama, and he told me that in Panama there were normal boas, and then right next to the normal boas you could also find the hypomelanistic boa. And he had been producing some babies, and Jeff G was getting the babies from him, and was selling them. And he referred to the hypo looking ones as orange tails, and that's where that started. Dave Hardy was producing those, and that's where it all started. And the fact that we knew that his animals, he sent me pictures of both a normal and a hypo looking boa found in the very same vicinity. And his adult looked very similar to the unidentified boa I had. So thinking maybe the unidentified boa could have been one of his offspring from earlier years, but I don't know. But anyway, the orange tail ended up being, it also has the salmon boa trait.
Okay. And Warren, you might have told me this story. I think the first orange tail that was discovered, I thought I heard a story about being at an airport and a fence near the plane had like a bow on it, and that was the first hypo found, at least for the orange tail.
Yeah, I've never heard that story.
Yeah, that
Now
wasn't
to figure
me.
out the origin.
Yeah,
That
that
was
wasn't
you?
me. No, it wasn't.
Oh,
But
all right. I'll have to
I
figure
know
out
that
that.
I know that Dave Hardy had a hypomelanistic animal that he kept in his office, and he kind of bred them.
Yeah.
And this was before we knew about Hypo boas, and so it was just a pretty boa that he kept and he bred.
Yeah.
So it's kind of what's also funny is that, you know, with the story, some of them were sold as just nice boas.
Right.
And then
That's when we got them. I mean, you know, they were just really pretty boas, and of course I asked a lot more money for them, and then you know, Gordon's insight that this is probably something that's pretty special.
So to let people know about Gordon, Gordy is one of my really close friends. Also, I actually met Rich through Gordon. Gordy was a university professor, herpetologist, but he's also really well known for Schuett line animals. So if you ever hear about the Schuett line jungle carpets, Schuett line Brazilian rainbows, or Schuett line hog island boas, it was he and his brothers that were breeding these animals back 20, 30 years ago and generating these incredibly well-known lines that we see today. So if you talk to Nick Mutton, for example, you'll see that his jungle carpets, they all trace back, a lot of them trace back to Schuett line animals.
Yeah.
And they're all from Gordy and his brothers. So Gordy, and actually Gordy is, he and I co-author a whole bunch of papers on parthenogenesis. That's how I met Gordon 12, 13 years ago. And we've been really good friends since then.
He's a great man.
A very great man, yeah.
You know, Warren had made the comment earlier about just, you know, you having that animal in the pet store, getting rid of it, getting it back in your pet store. You know, there was a couple similar stories, you know, the VPI stuff at Tracy's pet store. I heard the first time they came in, she kind of said she wasn't interested. And then I heard even after she bought them, they were kind of disregarding the hobby. Nobody really thought anything of it. And then, of course, the Aztec Boa, I believe he sold that one to a teacher. And then it came back to him maybe like 10 or 13 years after he retired. And he looked at the animal and realized it was a mutation. You know, I love that about the early days. I think a lot of things were probably overlooked that we don't realize. I even heard in pied ball pythons back in the day, when pieds came in, they were throwaway animals because they were considered defective.
Yeah, I've got a good little Tracy story. I was back in the real old days. I was in Florida. I had a really good friend, Joe Fray. He had Southeast Reptile Exchange, and he was a school teacher, and he had probably at that time, probably the largest albino snake collection maybe in the world. And I got to be good friends with him. And I was at his house one night for dinner, and Dave and Tracy showed up. And he had just gotten in a huge crate, like 4x4 and a foot deep, of baby ball pythons from Africa. And Tracy wanted to go through them and see if, you know, what if there's anything special in there. And this was like when the only ball python out there was, besides a normal, was an albino. And so I helped her go through. There was hundreds of baby ball pythons, and there were a few gems laying up on top, you know, that were really bright yellow and stuff like that. But Tracy, we were going through them looking for patterns that were different, you know, little weird looks at things. And she picked out about maybe 15 or 20 baby balls that we set aside, and she took to start raising and breeding. And that's really where the entire ball python thing started. From that box that Joe Fray had, and Tracy picked out animals that she felt probably had something genetic going on.
Wow. About what year was that, you think?
Well, it was in the definitely in the 70s, earlier 70s, probably.
And what's interesting about that is that back in that time, ball pythons were considered one of the hardest pythons to breed. People just had real trouble breeding ball pythons.
Yeah, no one was breeding stuff. I mean, you know, my old school days, the only people that were breeding things were, you know, several of the major zoos. And behind the scenes, they started producing some cool stuff. And shoot, my whole growing up keeping all kinds of stuff, you know, everything was an import, and your whole goal was to get it to eat and live. And thinking of breeding things back then it just really wasn't, you know, we just concentrated on trying to keep an animal alive. and learning its needs and stuff. And then the big Texas zoos and Murphy and Brownsville the zoo, you know, they started breeding stuff, and then it got to be where, geez, maybe I can breed this, you know, and that's where it all took off, you know.
Very interesting. Well, let's jump. What year did the Salmon Boa then first come into your pet store?
Well,
91.
90, maybe 91 or 92.
Okay. What year did you build your first facility to breed boas in?
Well, you know, we had the Arizona Reptile Center, and then we had a warehouse behind it.
Mm-hmm.
We opened the store in 90, and a few years later, we moved it just down the street, and we got a warehouse where I could start breeding things. And it was Dobson and Maine, kind of back behind Elberson's Plaza, and that was a warehouse. And I bred, you know, different things, and I set up a mouse colony, a rat colony for the store, and that's where the Salmon Boa project started there. And then, long story short, I ended up leaving Arizona Reptile Center, and I was able to take some of the animals that I'd been working with, and I decided then that the salmon project was, you know, probably going to be something pretty big. I'd also produced a bunch of emerald tree boas. I produced 74 baby emeralds one year, and I creamed all the babies, and I was keeping a dozen or so to raise up for my retirement, and ended up to the following part with my partner. Anyway, I had to give up the emerald tree boas in order to be able to keep the Salmon Boa project. So it was a good move. You know, I wish I had all those captive raised emeralds right now, but anyway, life goes on, right?
I remember you told me that story, Rich, about the emeralds. I think it was maybe 4 years ago. I was out in Arizona, and I think I just had a litter of emeralds, and then I forget how many babies it was, but you then turned around and said, "Oh yeah, one year I produced 74 from like 6 females or 7 females,
5
big wild
females.
caught." Yeah, from big wild caught. All right, okay, cool.
Yeah. So when I left, I lived in Florida for a few years. When I was young, I had mostly venomous snakes. Like back in Iowa, when I was like 18, I was heavy into venomous snakes. There were no laws. I could keep whatever I wanted. And then I had a really nice collection of venomous snakes in Florida. But when we decided to move to Arizona, I wasn't able to bring them to Arizona. So I ended up trading Tom Crutchfield, who I'd known for a long time. I ended up trading him all my venomous snakes for a 3.5 group of wild caught adult emeralds, and I brought them to Arizona with me. And since they were wild caught, it took them several years to really settle in and become good, established, ready to breed. They were big adults, and I mean, I don't know how old they were, but you know, to grow an emerald to a nice adult size is, you know, not a young animal. And that first year that they decided to go, all 5 females produced. It was pretty incredible.
That's
and
amazing.
I got every single baby to eat.
Yeah, live hopper mice, right?
Yep, and the whole key to them, they won't eat a pinky, they won't eat a fuzzy. It has to be a popcorn hopper mouse, and every single one of them ate.
Wow, nowadays that's probably like $100,000 for that litter.
Yeah.
Like baby emeralds are like $1,500 now. But then again, you look at what the Salmon Boas were going for back in the day. Like I remember on your website you had them graded. It's like A, B, C, D, and then it's like K, and then double K or something like that there.
Yeah, I kind of graded because there were so many different looks, you know, and so just my preference and how I liked them, they got graded. And you could buy, price ranges. There were A, B, C's, and D's. There were keepers, and that's just kind of the way I did it.
Yeah, and then you
No,
expanded, right? You bred them into bloods. You bred them into both the Cal and the Sharpline albinos.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. The blood boa was really exciting for me. I was down the show in Florida, and Ron St. Pierre was at the show, and he brought these baby boas. I had his booth, and Jeff G. He came and showed me a couple that he got from Ron St. Pierre. And they were really this nice rust color with red eyes, and I'm like, wow, those are really cool. So I went over, and I still had the other two. So I traded him some salmon boas for the two bloody boas, and then raised them up, and then made bloody salmons, and then eventually, through breeding, I ended up producing the first bloody salmon albino, which now they have a new name for. I'm not up on all the new names with boas. I admit there's so many new names now, but it was a sun glow. There was a blood boa, and there was 1 in 16 born. And I remember that day. It was just unbelievable.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing the pictures on your website, because I used to tune into that website religiously back in Ireland.
Yeah.
And then whenever I moved to the US in 2006, I still checked in on and see what was happening. But that was always fun, because yourself and then Ralph Davis and Peter Cal would always post litters that were born that year, and it was some pretty cool things.
Yeah. So it's sure fun having babies.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, that was one cool thing too back then. Like you said, with the limited morphs, you had so many unique animals popping up. And, I remember at the end of the video you did with Tracy Barker, you were in the room showing just a bunch of animals. You had in like 41 quarts. And you had these two that had this almost like, I don't even know how to explain it, but you might know what I'm talking about. They had the most unique tails you've ever seen, almost like Indian beaded art on the side, the way it pixelated. Just these two that you put.
I had a pair that I called the Aztec Boas. They just had a pattern that was very Aztec-y kind of. I don't know if that's the ones you're thinking of.
I got a feeling the tail really stood out to me. And I remember in the video you showed them side by side. And it might have been the last two you showed.
Yeah. I was very honored too when Dave and Tracy came out to my place, and they did a video on the boas, and we filmed a lot of stuff and took a lot of pictures and stuff, and I was pretty honored about that too.
No, before we started this video, me and Warren were talking, and I had made a comment that one of the most unique things about that video is the way you set up your breeding cages, how you were constantly changing them up until they gave birth. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? And I'll have to post some pictures in the comments.
Yeah, so I had 4-foot neodeshes, flat fronts, and I wanted to, my building, it was fairly humid. I ran swamp coolers, and I like to have in one side of the 4-foot cage, I had one of those little black little cement tubs they sell at Home Depot that just fit in there perfectly. And so I would keep I kept the boas on corrugated cardboard, and then in that black little mixing trough box, I kept moist cypress. So they had a nice moist place to go, and it gave them really good humidity, and that worked out really well. And then I started having babies. I put 2 of those in. I had one in one side of the cage and one in the other side of the cage. And what really bothered me was if the snake would get crawl in behind it. So I made these frames that prevented the boa from going behind the tub or getting under it or anything. So that with a tub in one side with moist cypress, and then in the other tub I kept paper towels, a nice thick layer of paper towels that I would mist. And then I noticed when I was started having a lot of babies that the boas wanted to, they wanted to put their babies between the two boxes. There was a gap there, about 6-8 inches that a shoebox would fit in, and they always had their babies like between the two boxes instead of having them in the tub where I wanted them to be. So I just decided, I took between those two mixing boxes, I put two shoe boxes, and it got so great that every boa, practically every single boa, would deposit their babies in the shoebox. And so all I had to do was just lift the shoebox up out of the cage, and all the babies would be there and all their mess. And, you know, they weren't in bedding, so they weren't all, the umbilical cords weren't all mixed up in bedding and everything, you know. And it just made it such a nice procedure having babies. When, you know, I was having a lot of babies, you know, I got to some years 800 or 900 babies, you know. So, you know, 2-3 litters every day, and it was insane. Yeah, pretty special.
Yeah,
But
I had no idea your
those-
numbers were that high.
What's that?
Oh, I was just saying I had no idea your numbers were so high. Like, you know, you hear about boa breeders, but it's very rare to hear anybody even get close to numbers like that anymore. You know, maybe Pete Call back in the day, but yeah, that's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, it was, you know, my building, especially when I got out of the warehouse and moved to an acreage, and I built a building 30 by 110 and designed it pretty much to breed boas in. And it had 2 big swamp coolers in it. So, you know, here in 115 degrees outside in the desert here, my building would really never go over 90. And humidity was just thick, you know, I mean, like really heavy humidity. And it had 5 big skylights in it, so that the animals had, you know, the seasonal change with humidity, and the wintertime it was drier. And then with the skylights all tied in, I mean, like every single boa would go. It just was, the building really worked out well.
So how many animals did you have at the time then, Rich? How many adult breeders were you keeping? And
boy, I don't know that figure.
That's what we all say.
There was a lot of boas, you know, because I kept keeping things. You know, I get something more special, and so I had to grow those up. I remember when I first started producing sun glows, you know, I was selling them for $5,000 a piece, but I held back 30 of them, you know, and that was just it was really stupid to do, because, you know, by the time they, you know, were old enough to produce boas, other people were producing them and selling them too. So that always reminds me of when Bob Clark produced the very first albino retics. I think he got 7 of them, and took them to the show in Florida and sold every one of them. And I go, Bob, you didn't keep one? He said, Rich, I have the factory. And so he got, for those 7, he got huge money because they were brand new. Yeah. And I should have sold a lot more sun glows at $5,000 a piece and not kept 30. But it's hard when you have babies to not keep your favorites, you know.
I've done the same thing, and I know that Dave does the same thing. You know, every year I produce 5 or 6, maybe 7 litters of boas, and you know, at the end of the season, I've got like 25 sitting in a tub. Yeah. You know, that I'm holding back, and then I have to like fight with myself to kind of release some of them and move them out. But yeah. I think we all go through that exact same process.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. You know, and the bloody salmon stuff you did back in the day, I remember some of the hets you used to show off would have like a perfect pinstriping down the entire snake. And I think you kind of discussed, is that something we could breed? Really love the variability in those litters.
Yeah, the variability is crazy. And then once you had a salmon boa, you could salmonize any boa. You know, you could salmonize the motleys, you could salmonize the, you know, the albinos and monster tail. I mean, you could just, you know, put the hypo gene into everything.
Yeah, I remember you did that with Argentine boas, right? Did you do that once or twice?
With the Argentines?
Yeah.
No, I didn't do that.
All right. I thought there was somebody who did salmon teens or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, salmon teens were a thing. I don't know who did them.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
Yeah. So what about you also got into other hypo boas, which are the boa constrictor sabogai. Remember the
that was the
Pearl
cool
Island
thing.
boas? Yeah.
Yeah, that was the cool thing. So I had an opportunity to. Oh, I just got a low battery notice. So give me 1 second. I'm going to get a cord.
Sounds great.
You're okay. I really like that you brought those up. You know, those really did go underappreciated when he was making them back then. In a market today, I feel like people are chomping at the bit to get stock like that. And back then, I remember him on his website for sale. I want to say first round might have been around $2,500. And then I think some of his future litters, I remember the price came down. I was a little surprised, but you know, some of those things that, you know, just weren't there back then popularity wise, now like we wish we had them.
Yeah, the Pearl Island Boa. So that was cool. So one of my mentors, Louis Porras, I met many years ago, who is just one of the greatest. He had the shed in Miami, and I met him. Oh boy, a long time ago, and we got good friends. And he told me about these boas from the Pearl Island, Sabogis, and I got pretty interested in them. And he told me that Quetzal Dwyer had gotten some, and so I knew Quetzal, and we made a deal where when he got babies, captive-born babies, and the adults were directly from the island. He was able to ship me captive-born babies with legal CITES for Sabogis. And we got those, actually, Brandon White, he became partner on that with me. And they were pricey. And so we got that group and ended up producing them. And they're very similar kind of to the salmon trait, but they're much more lateral compressed, much more arboreal. When you see one, you know it's from there.
Yeah.
And then there was a big deal about it, how, you know, competition is and everything else. A German said he had also had Sabogi boas, but his actually came from Toboga. And just research and stuff, on Toboga, you find both normals and hypomelanistic animals. Okay, it sits off of Panama. Well, on the island of Saboga and the Pearl Islands, there are no normals. They are all Sabogi boas, and so we really had the only ones in the world that were available. And so that was a nice little project there too. And I still have people contact me, want to know if they could somehow get some, but I don't know who's working with them now or if there are any available.
Yeah, they're still available, but their kind of availability has went up and down. And there were some people that were selling some in the past that weren't what they were advertised as. But as you say, you can tell a true Sabogi just due to the shape of it.
Just
but also
exactly.
Also the eyes. The eyes are brown.
Yep.
And not lighter.
Yeah.
But for people that don't know, Quetzal Dwyer owned Park Reptilandia in Costa Rica, and then he sold that the last couple of years, and he opened up Reptilandia Lagoon in Texas. So it's the same Quetzal that's mentioned there. He's been involved in bringing in some amazing animals.
Yeah, and he's an incredible breeder. He He breeds almost every single thing he touches.
And bred Boleyn's pythons outside in Costa Rica.
Yeah, he just got baby crocodile monitors. He started the whole black water monitor, the crocodile tegu from Peru, plus there's all kinds of things. And I have been to his new place in Johnson City, and I must say, if you're in Texas and you can go to Johnson City and see his new place, it is probably the most incredible reptile facility exhibit I've ever seen. The cages are big as most people's living rooms. They're all natural, and it's just, once all the plants really set in and everything, it's just absolutely incredible.
That's amazing.
But I got, anyway, I ended up getting those from him, and it was a real nice, another avenue, a nice project.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, I'd mentioned, I remember when you posted those up for sale, they were a little out of my price range at that point, but the value of those animals today, I know maybe Vin Russo may have some in his collection today. I think I remember him seeing it, but like I said, outside of Vin, I wouldn't even know who would have anything that was truly pure, I guess is the way of putting it.
Yeah, there's a few people with them. Yeah.
Well, what was Scoro Boa was another big move for you back in the day too.
Well, that was my, I guess I call that my grand finale. So I had a good friend named Tip Powers, and Tip Powers and I were business partners on a couple of the breeding projects. He was involved in the once the Bloody Boa project got going good, he was involved in that. And we heard about the gentleman in the Midwest that produced the way I know it, that he very first time he had 2 normals and he produced 2 Scoro Boas, and I think one of them passed, and he raised the other one up, and then he produced a litter. I can't remember how many. There was like 8 or 10, but we just thought the project was incredible. So Tip and I, we bought every one of them. They were 20 grand a piece. I know, it was insane. But I was taking Boa money, to buy Boa.
It's not real money.
And so, no way could I go afford a snake like that at that time. But, in selling Boas and trading Boa and whatever. Anyway, we bought all of them. Well, when we got them, we were excited, but also disappointed. There were several there that just had the corkscrew problem so bad, and they had mites. And so we're like, oh my God, IBD. It's got to be IBD. And so we ended up sending the 3 that were just totally corkscrewed back. And so in raising up the other ones, they did well. And the very first I produced was some bloody Scorias, and there weren't many, but they were good animals. They didn't really show the problem much, and then the next year, then I produced a couple litters, and there were some animals that had that the head wobble, and we pretty much decided that it wasn't IBD. It was just a genetic thing with the line. So my whole key was to outbreed the Scoro Boas to a really nice, like a really clean, nice Colombian. And so the very first ones I offered up for sale, I had Bill Love take photos, and remember there was maybe 8 or 10 that I ended up selling. I didn't sell anything that had a head problem. I just, didn't feel good about that for the money. And so those were the very first animals in the world that started. Those are the matriarch and patriarchs of the entire Scoria project. And then Henry bought a pair up in Canada, and he had great success with getting some babies, and then he started selling. But once I sold those animals, I decided I was going to retire, and that was the Scoria Boa was kind of like the grand finale of boa breeding for me.
Can you remember how much you sold them for originally, the first ones?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, they were 12 or 15,000 a piece, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, that's great.
It's an outrageous looking mutation, and there was it got really quiet in the industry for a while with that project. So probably the 2015, 2016, they kind of jumped back up. There was some fear in the hobby about females being able to reproduce. I don't think anybody had ever seen one at that point reproduce. Did you have females reproducing your collection for the Scorias early on, or were you mainly doing that with males?
So you're kind of cutting up. I didn't quite catch all that.
Let me turn my Wi-Fi on and off really quick. We'll see if that makes a difference. Just hang tight. Like I said, we can edit this out.
The next day.
Short intro, little introduction for me for Rich. I purchased one of my first investment boas from Rich back when I was around 18, 19 years old. I spent about $1,000 on it. And that was a lot for me back then. Well, I got the A, not the AA or AAA. I bought what I could afford. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. Well, throw that in my face. But no, yes.
I hope it was a nice one.
It was a beautiful animal. Rich is a guy that I've always admired in the hobby coming up. So like I said, I'm always excited about a conversation like this. Rich, if you want to do like a small introduction, let people know who you are, and we'll kind of go from there.
Okay. So Rich Ihle, I grew up in Iowa. I fell in love with reptiles when I was really young. From second grade on, if I ever did a report or did anything, it was all about reptiles. Marlin Perkins and one of my heroes, and Tarzan. Those were my heroes growing up in Iowa. I didn't know anybody that liked reptiles, but my second grade teacher thought it was awesome that I really enjoyed them, and she promoted that. And so all through my childhood, I searched out to find a reptile, and it was far and few between in the farmlands, the cornfields, when I was young in Iowa. But some of them said they saw a bull snake at the railroad tracks, and then I'd be out there, all day long walking the railroad tracks trying to find a bull snake. But I bought my first snake at Cat's department store, and I didn't have enough money to pay for it, so I put a deposit on it, and guess what it was? A boa constrictor, about a 3-footer. And when I got enough money, I went and picked it up, and everybody wanted to see it, and everybody wanted to watch it eat, and I built a stupid cage. I built this cage that was made out of 1/4-inch hardware wire, hardware cloth, and the floor had a little ramp that went up to a higher spot, and then I had a sunken cake pan for a water place, and it was just a terrible setup. But that was the very first cage I built. But anyway, just always hunting reptiles. I got to tell you this one story real quick. In high school, once I got my driver's license, I could start, getting out and starting to look for things. And the janitor came to school one day, and he goes, everybody knew I had snakes. Everybody, knew I loved snakes. And this janitor came in, and he said he was looking to buy this piece of property in the town next to us, and on top of a hill. And he said he pulled up there, and he said there were snakes everywhere. And he said he killed a couple of them. I said, how big were they? And he said 4 or 5 foot. So I figured they had to be bull snakes. So right after school, I drove over there. Now, I don't, if anybody's going to believe this story or not, but it's true fact. I went up on that hill, and I had a Jeepster Commando, a 67 Jeepster Commando. So it was all closed in. And I pulled up on that hill and opened the door and stepped out, and there was a 5-foot bull snake curled up sunning outside of a ground squirrel hole. And oh my God, I bent down to pick it up, and I grabbed it. And when I bent down out of the corner of my eye, I see another one curled up. And I grabbed that one. So now I got a 5-foot bull snake in each hand. And I look over and I see another one. So I looked around a little more, and I could see 4, 5, 6 of them curled up sunning. So I started putting them in my Jeep. I didn't have any snake bags or anything, so I started putting them in my Jeep, and I'm running around on top of this little hillside, and I found 14 5-foot plus bull snakes.
Wow.
And I had them all crawling loose in my Jeep, and I took them because the guy was going to kill them all. He was going to build a house there, and it was obviously a hibernation site. So I ended up selling them to farmers around me to turn loose in their corn cribs for $5 a piece. that was my first major catching snakes experience.
What year was
That's
that?
cool.
That was like in '69.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let
Then
me
I started going. What's that?
Let me check what $5 was worth now in 1969 money.
Oh,
Well, I'll tell you what. I would in the mid '60s, like in junior high stuff, I'd mow a yard, and I'd mow a yard for $5. So
nice.
I
grew up in.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. So, similar to you, like, going out herping as a kid, I was discovering garter snakes, of course, everywhere, the occasional Nerodia, but there wasn't really much diversity in the species I was finding as a kid. But in my adult life, I've gone back to outside of Madison, Wisconsin, and a good friend of mine put me on a hillside. And similar to you, not as cool as your story, but I walked this hillside for hours. I flipped some rocks. I found some Eastern milks, a couple garters. And then there it was, about a 5-foot bull sitting right next to a burrow. Coolest thing ever. First bull snake I'd ever seen in the wild. And, with all the herping I've done in the United States, it was just funny to see something like that in a state like that, because in my head, I just couldn't see snakes living in a state like that. I couldn't see hognose in Minnesota and in Canada until I really learned about these animals' ranges.
Right.
In contrast, however, growing up in Ireland, I never had any opportunity for any of that. So maybe an earthworm, that's about it.
Yeah.
Oh.
The only things we ever had, that one time when I was a young kid, of course, I was probably 2nd or 3rd grade, and my dad was out in the field plowing, and I was out in the barnyard messing around and stuff, and he got off the tractor, stopped tractor out there, and he hollered, Richard, get some gloves and a box. And I'm like, oh man, he found something, So I go running out there, and he plowed up a great big tiger salamander. So that was one of my very first cool herps as well. And that was exciting. I was really young then, and that was a very exciting moment.
Yeah, I think
just to let you know, $5.69 is currently worth $43. So you did well on their trip.
There you go. So, but I would start going to Missouri in my Jeepster Commando on the weekends, and trying to find snakes, and camp out, and ended up, finding some things, black rat snakes, and I caught my first copperhead. Oh my God, I got a copperhead. So when I brought the copperhead home, I was living at home, and I was still in high school, and I I brought that home, and I had a snake room down in the basement. No one ever went in there. You know, it was kind of a dungeon down there. It's an old farmhouse, you know, and the walls are made out of boulders. But I had my little critters down there, the stuff I was messing with, and they said, you know, you can have your little room down there, but you're not keeping poisonous snakes in our house. And I'm like, whoa. So my uncle had a chicken house, okay, and he wasn't using it anymore. So he was about 4 miles away, and I said, I called him up. I go, you got that empty chicken house. Is it okay if I make a snake room out there? And so he let me take his chicken house, and I went to the back end of it, and I about 12 feet out, I put a wall and insulated it and everything. And I had a little electric fan heater in there. And so that was my new reptile room where I could have anything I want. And
Nice.
in Iowa, there are no laws. So you could have anything you could afford to buy. And of course, I wasn't buying snakes at that time, but and one of my other real great little things that happened to me when we graduated from high school in '70, we went on a road trip to North Carolina, and we went to Myrtle Beach, and of course I'm looking for snakes, you know, the whole time, and I'm driving on a frontage road, and curled up right on the shoulder of the road was about a 5-foot chain king snake just laying there basking. Oh, that was like the greatest. That was the holy grail. I couldn't even believe I, you know, found that. And it just kind of all kept going from there, you know. Started buying a lot of snakes, but I was so into the venomous snakes. So, you know, I had some good friends in Florida. Well, it's my first job out of high school. I worked at an area college, and in the wintertime we moved snow. And instead of getting paid, you would get comp time. So, and plus working for the state, there was 3 weeks paid vacation. So my very first year out of high school, I had 6 weeks paid vacation. So I did a trip to Arizona, I did a trip to Texas, I did a trip to Florida, and I went to all the zoos, and I got to meet all the keepers, you know, like the guys in Dallas and Fort Worth and down in Brownsville, and I met the people in Florida, the Louis Porras. Okay, I don't know if anybody knows that name. Warren probably does.
Absolutely.
Louis Porras. He was, as a teenager, a young teenager, he worked at the biggest importer in Miami, and he would unbox these crates back in the early days, and he'd open them up, and there wouldn't even be in bags and stuff. Cobras flying everywhere, and he'd let me know. I got to meet him, and we became good friends. And so he would handpick stuff for me, and I put together this incredible venomous collection with gaboons and rhinos and awesome puffs and jumping vipers and tree vipers. So that was my first love, and I did that in the early days. Of course, then all you did was try to keep things alive and get it to eat. There was no breeding going on, but in going to those zoos and seeing what they were doing behind the scenes, you could see that, hey, some of this stuff could actually be bred, you know?
Sure.
But being a reptile man, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that can say this, when you're a reptile man, it's tough to make a living at being a reptile man. So you always have to have this job to support your hobby, right? And I've had a lot of jobs. I've got a lot of chapters in my life until I was able to finally become a full-fledged herpetologist. Well, not a herpetologist, a herpiculturist. So
yeah. No, the grind to get into it. And not only that, like, you know, when you talk about herping back in the day as a kid, you know, now that the hobby's so developed, some people just come right into the hobby because the hobby's here, where, like you said, some people get introduced to the hobby because they were already in the hobby. They just didn't know about it.
Yeah.
So, and the same thing with working, however you got to do, like, my goal the moment I found out about the hobby was, what is it going to take? And it took
Yeah.
factory work and more factory work. And I sold my
Been there.
body to science, like everything.
Yeah, I've been there, done that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm a jack of all trades. Being raised on a farm, I can do everything. Not as, now I can't, but I did in the past,
Oh. So, you talked about your travels, your opportunity to meet all these people in zoos, talking about the 70s that had put you in your 20s. Last time we talked, you brought up Tracy Barker and an encounter you had with her back in 1977 down in Florida. When along the way did you get the chance to meet Dave and Tracy?
So I'd heard of them, and I think that was really my first formal meeting with them at Joe Fossey's when we picked out all those ball pythons. I think that's the first time I actually met them and kind of become friends with them.
Very cool. And I know you told the story to me last time. If you're willing to tell the story about them picking out animals and your suspicion that might have been their first.
Well, yeah, I was there, Joe, and Joe was a great friend. Joe Fossey, he back in the 60s probably had the largest albino collection of snakes that anybody, certainly in the United States, had. Everything was albino, and he lived right down there, so he had access to the importers and everything, and got to meet him when I did that Florida trip, and we become really close friends. So I was at his place, and Dave and Tracy showed up. He invited them for dinner too, and he had just gotten in this crate that was 4 foot square and a foot deep, and took the lid off, and there were no bags, no nothing. The whole thing was full of baby ball pythons, just raw, just like I say, no bags, no nothing. And sure, there were a few on top that were like jumped out, like, whoa, nice bright yellows and stuff. But Tracy was interested in some of the unusual patterns, maybe a normal ball python, but had a weird pattern and stuff. And she ended up picking out maybe 15 or 20 animals that she wanted to grow up and breed and see if there's some different traits going on. And that was right at the beginning, the very beginning of breeding ball pythons. The only one out there was the albino before that. But that was a cool deal.
No, it seems like every year in ball pythons, there's 5 to 10 new mutations that get discovered. I wouldn't be surprised if back then in the 70s and 80s when some of these animals were coming on, of course, people wouldn't have realized that some of these were mutations. So I'm sure some of the animals she picked out may have been something genetic.
Exactly. And that's what she was striving for. Absolutely. And I'm sure a lot of the traits that the ground floor traits, certainly came from, Tracy's work and Dave,
No,
And,
back then too, I don't imagine it was a giant community. I'm sure there was like 10 to 30 of you guys out there that really kept in touch, or was it a large community in the 70s and 80s?
No, it was far and few between. We didn't have the internet, it was you just didn't have contact with a lot of people. I was fortunate when I had my collection in the chicken house, okay, and then I ended up meeting Tom Widener. Tom Widener in Des Moines, Iowa. He was like we had a little herp club going, and Tom was like the guru of Iowa with reptiles. And I remember going to his place, and he had right in his living room, he had built a complex that hold about 8 or 10 cages, and he had a puff adder. It's like, oh man, And so got to know Tom, and then there's a couple of fellows from Ames that were really into reptiles, and so we'd all huddle up. And Henry Wallace too. Henry Wallace is a name that back then was really big into reptiles, and so every Saturday we would go to Tom's and help Tom because he had the coolest stuff, and we'd go there, and maybe clean cages and help him, and then maybe we take off and go to Winterset or something and go, find a rattlesnake den or catch red milk snakes. And just got to be every Saturday we would do that. Well, I had my collection in a chicken house, and Tom had changed his little garage into a reptile room instead of his living room, and he wanted to build an addition on it. So I said, I'll pay for half the addition if I can use half the space for my stuff. So I ended up moving my collection. We built it. Now I ended up moving my collection in with Tom Widener, and we kept the tradition going. Paul and Andy Hollander from Ames, they come down every Saturday, and we'd build cages or we'd go snake hunting, or and that was a little group from Iowa. But you really didn't have contact with anybody unless you actually went on a trip, and I was fortunate to meet all the zoo guys, and like Joe Laszlo. I mean, what an incredible person he was. I'm sure a lot of people never, don't know him, but the old timers do. He was one of the ground floor guys in herpetoculture, breeding the rare little Bitis vipers and stuff. And, he had us over for dinner in his house. And back then it was so cool. I'd go visit a zoo and the people would end up, hey, you can spend the night at my place, and Howard Lawler, another huge name I got to know early on in life. He was a curator of reptiles at the Sonora Desert Museum. And I met him coming out on a trip, from Iowa. And one more thing I wanted to interject that was a very awesome thing in my child, well, not my child, but my young years. I heard about Okatee, read the book, heard about Okatee. Well, I went to Okatee and stayed in the little town of Ridgeland. And snake hunting there was, oh my God, it was so good. And a guy named Pete Mooney from Iowa, he told us about it. And he ended up moving there and teaching school so he could live right in Ridgeland in South Carolina in Okatee. And so every year we go to Okatee, and the collecting, it was just these animals. And, we didn't take everything we found, but we kept a few, the prime specimens. And oh boy, those Okatee days. And then they shut it down because so many people started going and you couldn't get on the property anymore. But I was fortunate enough to be in the early days where, I got to experience Okatee a number of years in its glory days.
It's cool you're mentioning Tom Widener, because he's still in the hobby. Right?
Yes,
so
he is.
For people that don't know Tom, he developed a caging system. I think, was it Reptile Habitat Plastics, or they were a hollow core enclosure, really great for arboreals. And in fact, Tom, for a long period of time, had one of the largest emerald tree boa collections that you could see. And I think he still does have them. But he's now breeding like Boa longicauda and stuff like that there. So he's still in the hobby. You can still find him on like MORPH markets selling animals. So Tom's been in it for a long, long time.
Yeah, he's one of the grandfathers for sure.
Yeah, I still have his incubators today. I don't think they've been turned off in over a decade, and they're still killing it. But I remember his setup at the Daytona show. There was like a little side room that I think they put all his product line in. But if anybody knows the cheap lawn signs you see, the Repticon signs, the show me signs, what it was a material similar to that, where it had a hollow core, and it was an expanded version of it, a wider version. But I think he had a patent on that material, and nobody else is allowed to use that for caging for a while there.
I'm not sure about that.
Another guy did build them. I think he was in Oklahoma, but I missed the opportunity to buy 3 stacks of 3 of those for peanuts back in Tulsa, and I missed it by minutes. And I've always kicked myself because they were great enclosures.
Well, when we were building wood cages, I mean, he was an expert, carpenter, me too. And so we built some really fine furniture. But you know what we do? We build a great big thing that was 8 foot long and 2 foot deep and 4 foot tall. It took a moving company to move it, had about 15, 16 cages in it. Yeah. Oh my God. The way we built cages in the old days, there's some of them are still around,
Like even in the 1990s, I was building cages using melamine, melamine, and it was like an inch thick. and you build a 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot.
The thing will weigh a ton.
I got a hernia trying to pick the thing up. You know, I'm still suffering joint pains from those things in the past. Yeah. That was good times.
I think my first boa cage I built similar. It was probably the biggest monstrosity you could possibly build, and because I didn't even think about it, I built it in the room, and then I couldn't get it out of the room. So when I finally got done with it, it had to be disassembled. But but that's the that's the beautiful thing about the hobby back then. You know, just the learning experiences, and one thing too that we talked about is the creativity you had with your setup during your breeding season. And, we dabbled on it a little bit, and we're going to bring a picture up of that in a moment. But, you found a very creative way to take a pre-existing cage and add things to it to make it to where your boas would always have their babies in the same spot of the cage, which I always really loved. And we're going to bring that up in just a moment. We'll send her 2 pictures. But you can go ahead and talk a little bit about this again, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I was hooked on Neodesha cages, the flat fronts. I had mostly 4 foots, but I had some 6 foots and 3 foots. But when I started keeping large quantities of boas and started having babies, my building was all swamp cooled. There you go. That was her putting her babies right in the little shoebox. No mess, no nothing. To get them out of the cage, all you had to do is pick the shoebox up and take it over and start wrenching them off and setting them up. But so I wanted to have a moist place, so I used these cement tubs from Home Depot, mixing tubs that fit perfectly from front to back in the 32-inch cage that's 32-inch deep. And so I'd keep cypress in there. There's a setup. So I kept cypress in one, and the one on the left was over a heat pad, flex watt, 2 foot long, 11 inches wide. And but I always had a if you ever use a flex watt, you want to make sure you have an air gap between the floor of the cage and the flex watt itself. So it's heating the floor, but it's not smashed between. You'll burn it up. So you always have a space between. And so that was the warm side. On the left, I kept a pad of paper towels in that one, and kind of kept them moist. And then on the right side, I kept cypress, and that made it really nice and humid in there. Well, the babies started having the mothers started having their babies in between the 2 black boxes. And they like to sit up. They like to have a compression. They like to have a place that's a little pocket to have their babies in. And they'd always have them between the 2 boxes there. So I built those frames to keep them from going behind the tubs, because that drove me crazy. And then they started, all the litters, they started putting their babies in the shoebox. They like to sit up and have a compression where they can put their babies. I always felt bad seeing gravid boa on a flat floor where it can't make a depression, and they struggle, trying to make, and I think sometimes you have babies born, they die inside the mom because she's trying to get a place ready to have her babies, and there's no place for a depression. And it's just a kind of an opinion I have anyway about breeding boas.
I use the same methods. So even in ranging from when I use kind of boa fowl type cages, the 4 foot by 2 foot deep by I think 18 inches, because they were a pain in the ass to clean whenever babies were born. So I started using shoe boxes in those as well, not with the other trays, but I would put a couple of shoe boxes or bigger, maybe cat litter trays, and they'd do the exact same thing. They would, whenever a female was due a couple of days before that, I would put in those tubs, and you were guaranteed they were going to be born in that, and you just pick them up. There's no mess.
No mess. And if you're having babies on shavings or something, or aspen or something, and the umbilical cords are all jammed up with wood chips, and they're with the shoebox thing, it's just flawless, perfect, clean. It's just a breeze.
No, I love that. And you know, the thing that some people don't understand in the hobby, especially newer people, is that you know, some of us look at these animals differently. And for you to be able to look at the cage, look at the way the animal was moving around, knowing that it was searching for something, and then you figured out what it was looking for. And like I said, not everybody puts that time in, but the people that have been great at this, everybody has a story like that.
Well, and the thing too is, you know, and this is with, you know, all herps and maybe just, I mean, animals in general. If an animal is searching and wanting out, and you can just tell they're not content, they're not happy. And, you know, they might be doing that looking for food, and you feed them. But if your animal's constantly wanting out of its cage, something is not right. But when they're just happy, you know, and they're just, life is a dream, you can tell, you know, you will recognize, you know, when they're comfortable. If they went out,
Yeah.
there's something wrong.
So from we should go back a little bit in time again. So, you know, after Florida and whatever, you then got into the pet store kind of business, and you were a co-owner of a pet store, right?
Well, let's jump ahead a little bit of that. I was working at John Deere factory in Ankeny, Iowa. I put 5 years in there and had killer collection venomous stuff. And everybody always wanted to come and see my snakes. So I decided I'm going to build me some nice display cases, and I'm going to put on some exhibits. And so I took over my dad's 2-car garage, and I built these really nice cages. And back then you could buy this great paint. It was called wood coat or something. It was a plastic paint. And boy, you seal that plywood and it lasts the rest of your life. You can't buy the product now. It's probably, you know, toxic or something. But built these nice display cases, okay? 3-footers, 4-footers, arboreals. And the very first exhibit that I put on was at the Science Center in Des Moines, Iowa. And it was a great hit. You know, I had gaboons and cobras and 6-foot water monitor I raised from a baby, and it went really well. And then I did another show at the area college where I worked when I first got out of school, and it was fabulous. So I'm going, man, this is what I want to do. So when I had the summertime, when I had some vacation, I did a couple fairs. So to do the fairs, little meal, you got to have temperature control and everything. So knowing me, I took and I built a room with 4x8 walls, paneled walls that all bolt together, and the room is 8 by 16 and or 12 by 16, and I had a plywood floor and a ceiling and an air conditioner, and I put on a couple state, not state fairs at that time, but I put on a couple county fairs. And I had a 20 by 20 tent I'd set up, and people could come into the tent, walk alongside one side of the room with all the windows and see my exhibit. And it went really well. Well, talk about the work involved. First of all, you got to transport your snakes all separate. Then you got to haul all the cages. Then you got to rent the tent. You got to rent the rental truck. So I was at the state fair in Des Moines, Iowa. And excuse me, I saw this trailer from Triggs Manufacturing in Belmont, Iowa. And it was 40-foot fifth wheel trailer. And they had cut 4 great big windows in one side of it. And they sold saddles and bridles and all this stuff out of this 40-foot, one solid piece of fiberglass, like a boat. Beautiful fifth wheel. And I said, man, with the windows down the side like that and everything, I could have an exhibit in there. So I ordered a 40-foot fifth wheel trailer, and a friend let me, he had a machine shop that he wasn't using. He let me put that in his machine shop, and he had all the metal works, everything. And I built a 40-foot living quarters, bathroom, shower, 150-gallon fresh water, 150-gallon bad water, big 6-foot water monitor with a sunken tub. I had all my cages displayed behind 1/4-inch plate glass, 1/2-inch vacuum, 1/4-inch plate glass, and then 4 inches of airspace, and then the window on the cage. And then they had 4 big locking doors that locked over the windows for travel, 2 big 16-foot awnings that come out, and then a canopy that hung down with all my advertisement and stuff. And I started doing traveling, doing shows with a 40-foot live-in mobile unit. And that was incredible. That was incredible.
Sounds dreamy, buddy. Do you have any old pictures of that you can email Warren or me? I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I do. I will do that.
All right, that's appreciated.
So I did that. Went on the road for 3 years. Now, Monty Creason, another old timer, reptile guy. He was a showman. He did shows in California. The name of his company, some people will know it, a Monty's Traveling Reptile Show. And he did shows in malls, and he had these cages that telescoped into each other, and he hauled everything in a van. So he'd go to the mall with his van, set up his cages on tables, and put on his display. Well, I was building my trailer, and he came down with a gentleman named Carl Kosulki, football player, and they came to my place. Carl was in a wheelchair. He had an accident. Matter of fact, when Carl had his accident, Monty was on the motorcycle with him. Sad story. But anyway, they came, and Monty walked into that shop, and he saw this 40-foot fiberglass, beautiful freaking trailer I had. And he'd been running around in a van with these telescoping cages. And he goes, oh my God. So he ordered one, and he built a great big 40-foot reptile exhibit. So together, we took both trailers to Canada for the summer fairs. Calgary, Edmonton, Regina, London, Toronto. We got top concession award at the Calgary Stampede. We had the biggest, most incredible mobile reptile exhibit in the world. We had a 20 by 20 tent between the 2 trailers. I had all the venomous snakes and all that stuff. He had a nice big alligator and pythons, and we blew them away in Canada. We were up there all summer long, and it was really well. And then the next year, I'm gonna try shortening this up. The next year, we went back, and if you're in Canada, we're doing fairs all summer long. They last like 20 days. And you're up open at 9, and you're up till 2 in the morning and eating fair food. So the next year, we hired a chef. He was this great guy, Dick O'Leary. He was a school teacher in Wisconsin, and he was off all summer. And biologist, loved reptiles, and he was our private chef all summer long in Canada. So there were 3 of us working. Monty had a guy, and one would get up early, and he'd have breakfast ready for him. And he'd go out to the front gate and start collecting money. And then the other 2 kind of had a quiet, didn't have to rush out there. And they get ready and fix them breakfast, and then fix a nice sandwich for lunchtime, and then make a nice dinner in the evening. And we had a private chef all summer in Canada, and we made a lot of money. It was pretty cool. But then I wanted to breed reptiles. Well, you can't breed reptiles being on the road. So I wanted to sell my trailer. So I ended up selling my trailer to a close friend named Terry Odegaard. He had some of the old schoolers know him. He had a pet store in Minneapolis called Twin Cities Reptiles way back. And
he's still alive today, isn't he?
I think so. I believe so. I've kind of lost contact with him, but I talked to someone the other day that said he's still around. But
yeah, I think maybe like 5'10", not too tall.
Not too tall, no. And older now, like all of us.
Yeah, I met him recently, or within the last year. He was at my table, and he handed me a business card. We talked for a little while. He was somebody I wanted to reach back out to at some point.
Yeah. Great herper. We did Okatee together, and we went on a lot of trips together, traveled together. So he bought my trailer, and I had an opportunity to open an exhibit in Florida. I had my trailer. I was set up in San Antonio, an RV park. And I told the guy that ran the RV park, I open my exhibit up at night, turn the lights on, let people look at the reptiles. If I could stay there for free, he said, fine. So this old timer came through. He's from Florida. And I told him about my dream of having an exhibit breeding center. And he says, I have a building you can use. I go, what do you mean you can use? He goes, it's 50 by 120. And you take your money, you put it in the building, build your exhibit, and I'll take 10% of the door. And so I sold my trailer, sold my home in Iowa, moved down there. They were making prefab homes in the building, and dust and cobwebs. There were no soffits. It was just a tin roof on trusses. Birds free flight through the building, spiders. Oh my God! We swept out a spot in the middle of the building and set up my water bed with my wife. And she put her through this. We didn't have a bathroom. We had to go next door to the motorcycle shop. He put new bathrooms inside, but out behind he had these old bathrooms with the doors hanging, full of spider webs, everything. And that was our bathroom. And we'd take a shower with a garden hose laying in the sun to get warm water to do your hair. And I took that building, I put in soffits, I put in a reptile exhibit, I put in a bathroom, septic system, built this beautiful exhibit. And just before I got open, he came to me and he goes, we need to come up with a fixed rent. And I go, yeah, handshake. I'm from Iowa. I had a handshake agreement. 10% of the door. I spent every dime I owned on that building. And I lost it all. Everything.
Wow.
I got my snakes and had to go rent a house and get a job.
Wow.
Yeah. One of the chapters in my life, you know. But
yeah, to be a reptile guy, you know.
I know. Yeah, but it's all good. I survived.
So then how did that lead to the shop?
So I was being a carpenter snake man in Florida, and my wife had a job opportunity in Arizona. And I said, I love Arizona. I've been out snake collecting and stuff. Let's go. We'll move to Arizona. And I can be a carpenter snake man out there. And so we moved to Arizona, and I started, finding little odds and ends to do. And there was a pet shop up on Chaparral and Hayden called Birds and Things. And I would stop in there and give them a little advice. They tried to do a few reptiles, and I'd stop in there and give them a little bit of advice and stuff. And the guy says to me, why don't you come work for me? I said, well, you can't afford me. First of all, I was doing pretty good doing other things. And he said, what if I could? I said, well, I don't know how you can. He said, well, I'll pay you a flat fee and I'll give you 20% of retail. I said, 20% of retail? So he let me design a reptile department in that store and built a nice section. We were doing really good. It was going great. And I hired Terry Odegaard. He moved from Minnesota to Arizona, and he stayed with me till he got a place of his own. And we worked that store together. Two expert herpers running it was great. Well, the landlord wasn't paying the rent, and he was hoarding the money, and so he got locked out of his store. And this gentleman, I don't want to talk about it, this gentleman took over the store, and he wasn't very tall. He kind of had a Napoleon complex. And I ran the store. Okay, we had birds, hand-fed birds, and reptiles. And I'd ordered these birds from Washington. The guy hand-raised these macaws for us. So when they were ready to go, he was ready to ship them to us. I committed to them, and I went to the owner and I go, I need to send a check to this guy to get these macaws in. And he goes, well, he needs to ship them to me, and I'll pay him once I get them and like them. I'm going, you don't do that. I got to pay him before he's going to ship them. Well, then I'm not doing it. And I was livid because I'd done business with this guy, and he raised these birds for us, hand fed them till they're ready to go. And I told him, I just told him off, and he goes, "Well, you're fired, and you can take your buddy Terry with you." And so that was the end of that. Well, Terry and I decided we're gonna start a store ourselves. So we got the wheels turning, and the guy that helped me remodel the other store saw what I turned it into and decided he would invest. And I built Arizona Reptile Center in Mesa. And it was a fabulous store. It was special. People would come from all over the world and say, "This is the nicest reptile store I've ever been in." I was very proud of it. And
it was there that the boa that then made you famous slipped into your hands and then out of your hands and then back into your hands and then out of your hands before it finally came back into your hands.
That's where it started. Yeah. Wow. So, my life's like a book, like most reptile people. The biggest blessing is I got to come into the hobby when it was just all learning and meet all the major players, and learn so much from them, behind the scenes in the zoos and seeing their techniques and their ideas, and then having people like Joe Fray and Louis Porras and Rob McGinnis, hand picking animals for me all the time. So I would always just get the best stuff, I'm just certainly blessed. Yeah.
Being in that region, did you ever deal with Bob Applegate?
I know Bob real well, but only from California.
Okay.
We've had many long nights together telling stories, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to have a few conversations with him. He invited me over to his home last year to do a little herping with him and maybe have a couple beers next to his pool. It's just so hard to get away from having a large collection that it was something I didn't get to take advantage of. But I'm hoping this spring, if the offer's still on the table, I'd really love to go visit that guy for a couple of days.
Yeah, he's another one of the starters, man. He's like, as big name as you can get. Good man. Yeah.
No. So if you don't mind, I want to bring us back to where Warren was talking about the original Salmon Boa that came into your pet store. If you don't mind, talk when you're ready.
Yeah. So give me 1 minute and I'll be right back.
No, you're okay. We'll chat in the meantime.
I'll be right back.
Take your time, sir. So Warren, how's your breeding season going, by the way?
It's looking okay. Moving from Oklahoma to Virginia, a lot of different conditions. Last year was really successful, and I'd planned to have maybe 1 or 2 boas to breed this year, but it looks like we're going to have maybe 9 different pairings of boas and then some rainbow boas. We've got 2 pairs of womas that are currently breeding, 2 pairs of Darwin carpets that are currently breeding, 4 or 5 different Antaresia. So between spotteds and children's pythons, some T positives and stuff like that are breeding. And then I've got a group of emeralds that are together, possibly putting some Amazons together, and then putting some Trinidad tree boas together as well. But yeah, it's been really good. We, normally I don't put things together until January 1st, but we had a cold spell come through. So I put a bunch of Sonoran boas together. And multiple different Costa Rican T positive line stuff and Hog Islands as well.
All right. So, I always tell you I cheat a little bit, especially with the Colombians, and I do a little ultrasounding to know when I'm supposed to or not supposed to breed. And, it's funny because I got a message from a gentleman in Kansas City the other day who asked me to ID his litter for him that he just had the other day. And I don't know whether or not to consider that a late in the season litter or an early in the season litter because my first ones will be in March.
Yeah, I would consider that late.
Yeah. Are we still good?
All right.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, you're good, man. We're just chatting boas. So we're going to bring that image up again for you, but the original Salmon Boa.
Oh, yeah. I saw it come up.
Yeah. So that young lady showed up in your pet store a couple times, you said.
Yeah, and she was a big girl. And as you can look and see, what do you call that boa? I called it the unidentified boa. And,
Yeah.
you know, with talking to a couple people that, you know, were, I felt very confident about, like Dave Barker. He said, and it looks like an animal from Panama. And it was very similar to, like I said, Dr. Hardy's big female that was producing normals and hypomelanistic boas.
And he had collected his in Panama himself.
He
right?
collected them himself, yes.
Mhm.
And I have pictures of him, you know, holding the animals in Panama. You know, a hypo, which now we know is a salmon,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's kind of a
No, you're allowed to.
Anyway.
That's a jab. I'm sure he's
kind of-
listening.
Okay. No, it's just kind of a sore subject. Okay, there were salmons
Yeah, right.
when they came from me, but when anybody else got them, they were hypos. Okay. Anyway, but I have pictures of him holding these animals who were right there in the wild in Panama, a hypomelanistic animal and the normal ones that come from there. And he was producing animals, and Jeff G was selling the babies for him. Well, actually, he was buying them and reselling them. And Jeff turned them orange tails. That's where the orange tail term came up from Jeff G. And so he was also producing salmon boas that turned orange tail.
So psychological.
So the nice thing about what you did is that in collaboration with Gordon Shewitt, who was an academic and who's still around, Gordy does great things. He's a great friend of mine, and it's who I met Rich through. In collaboration with Gordon, you guys put together a really cool scientific paper for the Journal of Heredity. It's a journal that I'm an editor for, but it documents proving out that trait to be a heritable trait and to be an incomplete dominant trait. And I know that a lot of people today are talking about, you know, how do you go about establishing a trait and proving its inheritance? Rich and Gordy did this 20 years ago and published a really nice paper as a result of it.
Yeah. So I kept all the individuals, you know, and then started doing different breedings, breeding them back to each other, keeping all the percentages of, you know, which ones were hypomelanistic, which ones weren't, and just compiled all this information. And once after 2 or 3 years of compiling all that, then we were able to have the paper accepted by the Journal of Heredity.
And if anybody wants that, just email me and I'll send it to them. I've got a copy on my computer.
And that's why the hypomelanistic boa trait that is from Panama is the salmon trait.
All right, really cool. I think I remember when I was, you know, just because I didn't know, you know, I always thought the salmon boa looked so different than the orange tail. You know, I always thought the salmon had that lighter color, more pinks.
No, and I agree.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. But there's a reason for that. It's because the salmon boa was bred into Colombians. So you're getting that Central America and Colombian integrate. So you know you see it in lots of other traits. You breed a leopard, which is Sigma, but you breed a leopard to a Colombian, you get the pattern all exploding and so on. Whereas the animals that were labeled the orange tail or the Jeff G line, they were Panama to Panama. They were just inbred. And one of Jeff's big things that he did to sell them for years was he said there were F1s and F2s and F3s and F4s up to F5. So these were line bred or inbred generation after generation after generation. So you get that Central American trait versus Central American bred into Colombian. And that generates those two different phenotypes.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that. So the salmon boa, like you said, that was really a big breaker for you because, you know, at that point, you know, you really started going all in on breeding boas. And how big do you believe your collection got to?
Well, I had a semi-load of Neodesha cages delivered to, besides what I had in my warehouse. When I built my new building, it was 30 by 110 and had a semi-load of cages. I had to have 3 by
a shit ton is what you mean, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's there they are. And I had a one wall that was like 80 feet long. Okay. And then I had two center rows, all 3 foot tall, that were probably 60 foot long. Okay. And that was all the adult cages. And then I built a baby room that could hold 990 baby with the not the shoe box, but the I don't know what cord it is. It's the one that's
16 maybe.
Probably it could put a pair of nice sized big shoes in it, something like that. Not the sweater box, but not the shoe box, but that mid-sized Rubbermaid.
Mm-hmm.
I had a semi bring me a load of Rubbermaids. I own more Rubbermaids than I'm sure there's other people too, but I think
the reptile hobby's made Rubbermaid and Sterilite a lot of money.
Rubbermaid up here, Sterilite kind of like
agree.
Here. Yeah.
Well,
I still have so after retiring and doing all that, I had to get out, sell my building, sell my property and get out of the building. I had all these Rubbermaids, and so I didn't have a place for them, and so I kind of left them at the building and said he could do what he wanted. Well, he saved them. So when I went to work for Christian, I go, I think I can get my hands on some Rubbermaids. So I went and got all those Rubbermaids, and now we have them. We're still using them today.
Yeah.
Okay. At Christian's store at Predators.
Yeah,
at the breeding center where I work.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, Rich is still in the business. He retired and then got right back into it a handful of years later.
Yeah.
So he sends me pictures just a couple of days ago of some baby Brazilian rainbow boas. Last year, you sent me some pictures of Western Sanzinia that were born.
Yeah.
Do you know what would be really nice? Those original Neodecia cages that you had, man, to get those again, those were phenomenal cages.
Oh, I know. So my buddy Phil Calvert, he when I was selling them all, he bought a bunch of them and filled a whole storage unit just to have them until he got a place for them. And he had been storing them. So when we set up Christian's breeding center, I said to Phil, well, how about we use those cages? You won't have to pay storage anymore. So I'm still where I work today. I'm still using my Neodecia cages. A lot of them.
Brilliant. I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think those and the gray vision cages were probably two of the nicer cages that ever been made in the industry.
Yeah, the vision cage is nice,
Arboreal.
They have Neodecia arboreals. They had the big one and the smaller one. But the reason I like them is because of the color. The color, that cream color. You can see a mite walking on it.
Yeah.
Okay. Vision cages. You can see a mite walking on the wall of that cage is pretty difficult.
Yeah.
But I love the color of them and the lightweight. So lightweight. And if you take care of them, they'll last forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I like that. So current events, what kind of stuff you up to?
Well, I've been producing Angolans for several years now for Christian. We get Wumas every year. Hypo king rats. Spilotes, tiger rat snakes. Had the Madagascar tree boas. Beautiful litter. Oh my God! It was just when I saw them in the cage, I just lost it. What else? Pied Burmese. Producing a bunch of false water cobras, albinos and heifer albinos. Those things are insane. A lot of those. I've been working with a pair of white lips I finally have to where they're ready to go this year. I'm real excited about that. Working with a pair of yellowtail crebos that hopefully can go in the springtime. Ring pythons I've been raising up, not quite ready to breed. And then we have a really nice group of Brazilian rainbow boas. I'm still maybe going to get another a litter or two. Gosh, so many things.
Any salmon boas?
You know, I don't. I have one pair of boas in the building. It's a pair of Argentines.
Nice.
And a big pair of Dumerals.
Yeah.
But my buildings, you know, the reason I was so successful with boas is because my facilities was designed for them. You know, right in the middle of Arizona, I had two great big swamp coolers. One came in the east end of the building into the shop area that was 20 feet. Then there was a wall. And then I had another great big master cool in that wall. So the swamp cooler would bring it into the shop. And then the second wall, cooler would take it and hit it again. And then it'd all go out the west end. Plus the skylights and just natural temperature changes through the year. Let it get down to 70 at night in the wintertime. And of course, it was drier then. And then spring would come and the swamp coolers would kick in, the humidity go through the roof. And even at 115 degrees here, with only swamp pool, I was able to keep the collection not ever going above 90 degrees. So it was designed perfectly for boas and emeralds and, you know, tropical things like that.
So with a collection that size, were you breeding your own rodents as well?
I did. I did when I left Arizona Reptile Center, or when I was forced out, I should say. When I left there, we had a warehouse, and I kept the warehouse, and I had a breeding colony of mice and rats in the warehouse that I made to supply the store. But so I kept the warehouse, and I had that going. But when I built my building, I did not build a place to do rodents. And so I was buying my rodents, and you know, it was I guess I figured my bill was I did kind of figure it out one year. It was about $50,000 a year for rodents back then. I don't know what it'd be now, but you know, it was a lot of mouths to feed.
Yeah, I remember whenever you and I were at Bob Ashley's place a couple of years ago with Dave Barker, and the three of us were staying in that cabin, and we're sitting at the front of it one evening. And I asked Dave how much it cost in rodents for VPI, and he's like, well, it's maybe about $100,000.
Yeah, I know. It's just insane, you know. And I should have designed the building to where I had a rodent spot, but I didn't. So, you know, the thing about rodents is, you know, if you have snakes and lizards and stuff, so if you miss a day or something, you can be forgiven, right?
Yeah.
When you have rodents, it's pretty much someone needs to be there. And if you've got a number of employees if your guy's sick, another employee can do it. But if it's just you and you can't leave, rodent colonies, a lot of work. And the water system go bad, or, you know, it's just, so I chose not to do it.
Well, the good thing about buying rodents at that point, you know, that's like one good litter of Salmon Boas at the time, right? Because they were selling for big money.
Yeah, I sold some real expensive ones. Two or three boas paid my food bill for the year.
Yeah, and then it got even better whenever you bred the blood boas into them as well.
So the blood boas was just that was insane. Those bloody salmons were just scarlet, so gorgeous.
And you got into the blood boas at a time when Ron St. Pierre was like having trouble selling them originally, right? Nobody was really.
Well, no, he got 4 boas in.
Yeah.
And he decided that he was not going to keep them. He was selling them. So Jeff G got 2 of them, and he showed them to me, and I'm, oh my God, I want them. And so I went and traded and got the other two. And so those were the blood boas.
Yeah, they were the original El Salvador line boas. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So those were some of the ones I remember too. I'm glad that Warren was able to find that picture because that is honestly one of them that has always stuck out of my head. Like I feel like I can close my eyes and I can always see that image.
I know it's just when I have babies born, they were just, oh my God. I mean, I can't even believe that I sold some for 10, some for 15,000. I sold one for $18,000.
Well, you know, even with your time away from the hobby, like today, even today, the Sharp and blood combo is still going for a lot of money. The Call albino blood combo is going for a lot. And now people have worked the blood into the VPI stuff. And I guarantee you for the next decade, people are going to be putting a lot of work into that project and they're actually selling for a lot of money.
Yeah. I loved the blood project. I just absolutely loved it. And that first bloody albino was, that was insane.
Yeah. And if I remember right, I don't know if we had the bloody albino picture. I know we had some Sharp Sunglow pictures that we were looking at. I'll see if I got that bloody albino.
You can tell by the eyes.
That guy. There you go. That's the bloody albino. Ooh.
No,
it's not it. That was the only one I had. That had the bright red eyes. I don't think we had the blood albino then.
No, that's a Sunglow.
Is it?
No, look at the eyes. The eyes are bright red.
Yeah, the eyes are pretty bright red.
Sunglow wouldn't have eyes that color. They would have the regular eyes.
Yeah, that is a younger animal before some of that color really started maturing in because I have some other Sunglow pictures saved for you and they got the lighter eyes, the more yellow and orange.
Yeah.
It's not the best example. We could do better.
I don't know.
That one saved the thumbnail address and that was bloody albino, 11 months old.
Okay. Oh, 11 months. Okay. Yeah. I sold that one. I got 15 grand for that one. It went out of the country.
Wow.
That's the only one I produced. It was 1 out of 16 in that group.
Okay, cool. And, one other animal I just sent over, and I know we talked about it last time, but, just some of the variability in your animals when you're making salmon's het for blood. That pinstriping, love that animal.
Oh, I love that animal too. Yeah. Bring back some good memories.
Yeah, right. Well, you always had amazing work. And, I always paid attention to your litter pages because you were so good at posting pictures of the parents and the litter. And I think you had Cotton Candy was one of the nicknames you might have had for some of your really bright pink ones, if I remember. I think I said bubble gum, but I was mistaken on that.
There was cherry and there was banana.
Cherry.
So, the cherries, the cherry boas, I had a litter of boas born. And it was a pair of normals, and most of the litter were all looked alike, but there was a few in the litter that were just really pink, and we called it the cherry line. And some of those animals were pretty spectacular. That was early on, I think my buddy Phil might still have a cherry or two. They were gorgeous.
So Warren, I got to ask you because I have cherry animals in my collection that I bought from that breeder in North Carolina, Alex. I can't remember his last name right now. I don't know. Yes, sir. Something similar. Yeah, I had acquired his collection about a decade ago with all the cherry animals in it, and I still have those animals.
Yeah, he's a customer of mine. Yep.
Wow, that's awesome. I wasn't sure because sometimes people give different projects the same name, so I didn't know if that was the same lineage as your lineage.
Yeah. No, I remember. He bought numerous animals from me.
Is he the guy that did the Central American Motleys as well back in the day?
He may have. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, but I'll find some pictures and, actually I can bring up one of those cherries right now. We'll keep chit chatting in the meantime, but, yeah, no, that's really cool that, after all this time that lineage is still existing. And
That's
I have an
cool.
animal in the building.
That's still around.
Yeah.
That's great.
I have a non-hypo cherry male in the building that is absolutely phenomenal for not having any past or any hypo in it. And I also have a jungle arabesque cherry male that's actually in breeding right now. And the color saturation, again, for a non-hypo, incredible.
Yeah. No, the cherries by themselves were just spectacular Colombians, just spectacular.
So we did talk about it a little bit last time, and actually I just found some of these original images that I got from them. I'll see if I could send one of those over, but while I figure this out, hold on, chats. Where is she? Sorry, I'm wasting our time by doing this, but again, the animals are really some of my favorites. Okay, I just got that over to her for the cherry, but again, the Dave and Tracy video you did back in the day, you going through all these variables and all these different animals you were producing along the way. And like, again, that was one of the females that came in that collection, the one on the bottom and one of those babies on top. But every last one of them were just like 10s. Like there was no drab cherries. Animals. Yeah.
Those cherries were so special.
Wow. Yeah. I was lucky to get that. So what it was is he kept on putting an animal up for sale. Like I go over there one day and he'd be willing to sell me one thing. I go over there another day, he'd be willing to sell me another animal. And then the day came and he's like, hey, do you just want to buy the rest of the collection? So I got really lucky on that. And even some of his, random, like I said, I'm still working with that lineage. I actually have, I think, high-tech cherry het sharps that I put into breeding this year for the first time. And I made those like 5 years ago. So we'll see if that changes them at all. But no, that's cool, man. I like knowing that. I'll send you some images sometime. Appreciate you.
Good luck. Yeah. That cherry line was that brings back great memories seeing that photo.
That's selective breeding. That's when you breed the right animals to the right animals, you can make incredible offspring down the line.
So, and Warren, I know at some point you're gonna have to bounce. When you're ready, you just let us know. But we're gonna keep going until you tell us you're done. We're gonna go a little after.
I have to go in about 15 minutes because I gotta go with my kids. My wife's leaving to go to town, so I gotta switch over parental duties. But you can stay talking, and I'll talk to you later on, Rich. Anyway.
Yeah.
No, of course.
I can stay for another 10 minutes or so.
Oh, cool. So, Rich, I know we went into detail in this last time, and like I said, we're just gonna call that first round of flub. Don't be afraid to go into details on this, but Tracy Barker came to your home and did a VHS that I hopefully you can still buy on DVD today. And if it is out there, I really think people should go out and get this video. I really enjoyed the tour of your collection in this video. You want to talk a little bit about what that was like doing that with them?
Well, I mean, I was so honored. Dave and Tracy Barker, wanted to come and make a video at my place, and I was just, I was just so honored, and it was fun. We just went through the collection, showing the different looks, because breeding it take certain looks of the salmons, that had this one look, and then I'd breed them together, and there was a lot of different looks, and so. Man, I need to pull that video out and watch it again myself. I haven't looked at it for a few years. I don't know if it's still available.
It's not. I checked Tracy's website a couple of days ago. She doesn't have it. She has the ball python one, but I sent her an email as well to ask whether it was still available. I've got a copy on DVD, and I haven't watched it. I haven't watched it since I left Ireland. So it's like 19 years ago. It's the last time I seen it. But I was thinking, I've got one of my with a DVD drive.
I've got a couple of them around. I'm not quite sure where they're at. Like I said, I haven't looked at them for a while, but that was certainly an honor. And when someone like that, wants to, do something like that with you, I mean, it's just, what an honor. I mean, I felt very special. And the other really special thing I got to do was Chad Brown, okay, NFL player Chad Brown, him and Robin, you know, they place in Colorado and everything. Well,
Pro Exotics.
Yeah, Pro Exotic. So Chad, it's funny because he moved to town, and well, he came to ASU to play in the Fiesta Bowl, okay, and I knew Cameron really well, and Cameron and Chad were really good friends, and so Cameron told me that Cameron from Bushmaster, he told me that his buddy Chad Brown's coming to play in the Fiesta Bowl, and he's liking reptiles. So they wanted to come over to the store and see the animals. So they came over, and I met Chad, and he bought his very first pair of pythons from me. Guess what he bought? He bought a pair of African rock pythons. And those were his very first pythons. And then they went and they built this together, and they built this fabulous place in Colorado and everything. And so I get a call one day from Chad, and he goes, would you be interested in doing NFL films about your snakes? And I'm like, cool. You know, so Chad and Robin came down, and NFL Films came, and we went through my whole collection that day filming stuff. And then Chad and Robin, they both love sushi. And so NFL Films wanted to see catching a rattlesnake at night with infrared vision. So we went and had sushi, and we had so much sushi. And we spent too much time eating sushi, and I'm missing the window to take him out and catch him a rattlesnake, you know. So we head outside of town. Finally, we get out of there, and we're just almost past the window. And thank God, Sidewinder across the road, and we found one rattlesnake that night. But boy, they filmed it, you know, and they reenacted it. You know, Chad and I are front seat, and I go, "Oh, there's one!" You know, and we jump out of the car and run over in the bushes and stuff, and you know, kind of did some retakes of the deal. But that too, I was just so honored that I was asked to do that. That was a real fun experience too.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that up. That's something I've never seen before. I love to watch that.
Yeah, it's on NFL Films, and Chad was a big reptile guy. So when they did Chad, they did reptiles. So
I love that. Chad actually helps out a little bit on this network too. He's actually working on his own show on there, hopefully.
Yeah. He's Chad is Ship Your Reptiles.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. God, you reminded me of something when we were talking about that. I think it was an old reptile magazine. I remember it was an issue where they were talking about pro exotics. It might have been the centerfold, but there's a picture of Robin in front of a rack system holding a salmon boa, or what I believe to be one of your salmon boas.
Cool.
Yeah.
You sure it wasn't a hypo?
Well, it was a hypo. I'm just trying to say it might have been your hypo.
Oh, so then it would have been a salmon.
Well, I'm guessing here. I'm making shit up. No one's going to fact check me on this one.
Hey, you can't go wrong saying it was a hypo, right?
Yeah, okay. It was a hypo bow. I just thought it was phenomenal, so it had to be a salmon in my head. But no, that's fair.
That's fair.
Yeah, no. Honestly, man, here's the coolest thing about this conversation. Where I knew you from 2002 on, obsessed over your VHS that we're talking about. You filling in the blanks and all these other years, I would have never even have realized you've had such an eventful life in reptiles.
I'm so blessed, man. I just, I think back to some of the people that were so good to me and helped me along. I mean, when I was an Iowa boy. Let me tell you a quick little story, okay? Here I am, an Iowa boy. No one knows me, okay? And Western Zoological, Barney and Barney Tomberlin and his partner Jim Brockett. Okay. They didn't know me from nobody. And I'd get their list, and they got into this 4-foot East African gaboon. Okay. I had some West Africans, and I'm like, so I called them up, and Barney goes, this East African gaboon is one of the most gorgeous gaboons I've ever seen in my life. And I think it's like $400. And I said, I'll take it. You know, he said, it's pink. It's just awesome. About a 4-footer. And I said, I'll take it. Well, that afternoon, San Diego Zoo came in and saw that animal. Now, San Diego Zoo is probably their biggest customer, okay? Probably spends thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars with them. They come in and they go, we want that animal. And Barney said, can't have it. We sold it to this Iowa boy. And he honored that. He could have told me it died. He could have told me any story. And I'd have been like, oh, you know. But they shipped me that animal. And it was probably one of the finest gaboons I've ever seen in my life. A pink East African gaboon, about 4 foot long. And Barney Tomlin and Jim Brockett, here's to you.
Yeah, that really is a testament to Barney, because Barney passed away a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
but he was always like, and you and I were at the IHS meeting where they had the memorial for him, right?
Right.
And Dave Barker, and you know, it was a very touching kind of presentation they put together, and there was nobody could say a bad word about him. Yeah,
great man. Yeah. And boy, did he have stories.
Yeah, so Dave, you have stories. Yeah, the stories here. Anytime I get together with Rich, every couple of years, we spend 3 or 4 or 5 days out in Arizona and New Mexico with Gordy and Gordon Shewitt and Bob Ashley and stuff. And that Dave Barker shows up. And I'm an Irish guy. I like to talk, but it's the one time that you can guarantee that I'm sitting quiet, holding a beer and just listening, because these stories are just wonderful.
Well, you know, we all have our stories, you know. You know, everybody, all the old timers I know, man, they all have good stories.
Absolutely.
You know? The old days were very special.
Well, look, I'm going to jump out now and go and take care of my kids. Rich, I'll give you a shout over the weekend.
Great seeing you.
And I'll be catching up with you again next summer as well. So,
all right, you take care, buddy.
All right, Dave.
Thank you, Warren.
All right, take it easy, folks.
Yeah, everybody. All right. No, like I said, you know, there's a lot of different ways you can live in this hobby. And, you know, some people live in the breeding, and like me, like I've always been so obsessed that, like, you know, they just had Colubrid Fest in Indianapolis, and I really wanted to go to the first Colubrid Fest, and I didn't, and I heard it was an amazing time. And, you know, I've heard Carpet Fest, you know, I think they even have Retic Fest. The only thing I don't think we have in the industry right now is a Boa Fest. I don't know of anything where the Boa guys get together. And, you know, I know you've been out for a little while, but like at Tinley Park, X amount of years ago, all the Boa guys said, please put us in the same aisle. So you had every Boa guy in this entire show in one island. You had balloons up top selling out Boas. Yeah, I love that. But, you know, that really just shows how tight-knit the Boa community is, that, you know, even though the guy next to you might be your competition, everybody loved each other so much they just wanted to be around. But I think this industry really needs a Boa Fest. I think that's the one thing we're lacking right now.
Why don't you do that?
Well, I'd have to invite you out for it, and definitely some other people, because I want credibility. I can't just have some nobody show up. But honestly, I'm going to put some real thought into this, because that is one thing we haven't done in this hobby yet that I'm aware of, or I just didn't get invited, and that could also be the case.
Yeah. No, I love to get together with other reptile people. You know, back in the day, we had the big herp conference, and it's a lot different now. Back then, you know, everybody would bring animals to it, and you'd go around to everybody's motel rooms, and all the dresser drawers were filled with reptiles, and you see just awesome stuff and could buy stuff. And then they put a ban, you couldn't bring animals anymore. And but boy, the old days, they were really good.
Was that Orlando?
No, I'm not talking about the show. I'm not talking about the show. It was in a different state every year. The big herpetological convention. And and it was just all the herp people get together and they have guest speakers, and I think it still goes on. I haven't been able to go in the last years. You got to travel a different state, and I have not been able to go in the past years. But in the old school, it was one of my favorite trips every year, and I was able to go.
Wow.
All the old timers, and man, it was quite the deal. And the big shows in Florida. I mean, going down there and setting up, and man, the shows were huge back then. I haven't been back since. I'd love to go back sometime, but the shows were just incredible. I mean,
Yep.
The internet wasn't so popular. I mean, it wasn't around, so people would come to the show to buy animals, and you couldn't just buy them online. I'll never forget when I was first doing Salmon Boas. To tell someone about a boa, I'd say Mike Weissman and I. He'd come from California, Big Mike. He would come and photograph my animals for me. We'd run out and take it to the print shop, print the pictures, see if it represented the colors right, and realize that the color's off, have to reshoot all the animals, go back and have them printed again. Then you got to mail someone a photo. Now you just take a picture and, oh my God. Shipping was a pain. Shipping animals, you had to go to the airport, you had to go to Delta, you had to jump through all the hoops. Now just UPS, FedEx, bing, bang, boom.
Yeah. Fortunately, things have made it, or things are a lot easier now, which is good because, the hobby's so big, and it could never have got this big without things becoming easier. Like you said, ship your reptiles back in the day. That was such a huge step in this hobby. But, Daytona has always had a real soft spot for me. My birthday falls late August. So it had always been my birthday present to go there, even if I was just going to go for one day. And I want to say it was the mid 2000s. Like, I remember Reptiles by Mac would have those P positive Argentines on the table, the big females. Hans was there with the leopard boas. There was just something special about those shows back in the day. And don't get me wrong, there's amazing animals today, but it was just different back then.
It was different. And even before that, Orlando, that was just incredible shows. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did the COVID show at Tinley. March Tinley got canceled like the day beforehand. And I had already planned on going. So I said, I'm going to go no matter what. And the reason I bring that up is a bunch of vendors still showed up and a bunch of customers still showed up. And what ended up happening was people put their banners in the hallway and customers were walking in hotel rooms and buying animals off of beds, off of tables.
That's cool.
There was a real nostalgia there, but the hotel did shut it down after a little while. I just don't think they wanted us all interacting together, but it's still a great weekend because all my friends showed up.
Yeah, exactly.
So, man, there's so many things. Now this might be something you don't remember, but this is something I bring up in conversation every once in a while. The square tail boa.
Square tail boa, yep.
You did have square tails back in the day, right?
So get this. In the cherry line, in the cherry line, there was a lot of normals produced, and there were like two animals that were different. Real dark, different tails, and termed as square tails. Mike Weissman, Boa Mike, Big Mike out in California, he ended up getting those from me. And that's where the square tail thing started. It littermates to the cherry line.
I didn't realize that. I always knew they came from a pastel lineage. I didn't know if it was one of the European lines. I didn't realize it was the cherry for the founding animals. That gene always confuses me. I've seen a lot of really low expressions passed off as, and the reason I bring this up with you is I remember you posted a picture of a litter and both your parents were they were 10s. They had that perfect example of what the pattern was supposed to be, but it didn't look like the entire litter came out looking like the parents. And I know the project was said to maybe be recessive. Genetically, it's always confused me.
Well, until you do all the breeding, you know, you don't know what you have. Like with the square tails, you know, Mike ended up getting them, and he would, you know, I don't have the answers on how that whole thing progressed with him. But, you know, it seems to be a lot with me anyway. There's, you know, when you breed two animals together, you're going to get a variety of looks. Okay. And, one might pop out and it just might be, you know, a look, or it might be a genetic trait until you do all the breeding to figure out what exactly is going on. But it seems to me there's so many boas that just have a name, but there's nothing to back up the name as if it's a trait or a look. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Some people go to market before putting the time in, just because of a couple good examples of what they're making. And
sure.
Yeah.
No,
and I've seen that over the years, and not a problem. Like you said, you know, I know some boa. Yeah, everybody runs their business how they run it. And you know, some of those things I'm sure did improve out, but you know, some of them did. You know, I have a boa project I've been working on for a while now, and gosh, I think I'm going to be 10 years in before I can even say it's truly genetic. And you know,
exactly, yeah. But you know what? If you produce a boa, you can call it whatever you want, right?
No limitations. No rules. There's no rules in this hobby. You can call them whatever you want. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I will say boa names have done pretty good. When you get into like the ball python industry, there's some real silly names in ball python morphs.
It's out of control. You know, animals with 6, 7 genes, all mixed and blended, and I can't even believe how far that's gone.
No, it's incredible, and it's good for the hobby because, you know, some of the biggest spenders in the hobby put their money into ball pythons, and then those guys put their money into other species. So it really does fuel the industry all the way around. Like I've always said, like the economy of this industry needs ball pythons.
Yeah, and it's a fun deal. They breed well, and you get all these different looks, and you know, I've never, you know, produced some for Christian, but on my own, I never ever bred a ball python, ever. I had a couple I used in my shows. I did shows for a lot of years, and you know, I had E.T. He was a normal ball python that had an E.T. face, you know.
All right.
And I had a piebald named Patches that Pete Call gave me. That first year he took him to I can't remember if it was Orlando or Daytona, but that first year we just had piebalds. Oh my God, he had so many of them. And we were good friends. And I said, hey, Pete, why don't you just give me one of those? They were going for 10 grand. So why don't you just give me one of those? You got so many, and I'll use it in my programs, and I'll promote the look, and I promise I'll never breed it. He goes, fine, here. And he gave me a really nice piebald. It was so cool.
Oh, I love that.
Those I never bred them. I just didn't have. They're too boring for me. They're boring.
When I was in Buffalo, New York in my teens, when I started buying, there was a local lady. Her name was Mary. She was a nonprofit. I used to go in there and just listen to her talk. She wrote a little book, but even her, and that was again 2002. Like her dream animal for somebody who didn't like mutations was a piebald.
Yeah, I mean that white is so white, and you put even dark with it or some yellow and oranges. And I mean, it's a great look. Yeah.
No, definitely did a lot for Pete. And, you know, before I ever met Pete in person, I was terrified of Pete. You know, I had heard stories about him beating guys up and all that stuff. But I went to his house in Maryland with a friend of mine probably about 10, 12 years ago. And after being there for 2 days and him watching me try to make my phone work in the middle of the woods, he was offering to put me on his family plan on AT&T, like, you know, and it was such a beautiful building. You know, the log cabin look was amazing. He had that big, like, airbrushed hammerhead shark hanging above this, like, $10,000 table that he had. Like, he really, like, it was, his property was built on albino boa constrictors and pied ball pythons, essentially.
Yeah. I never got to go to his place, but we've been friends for a really long time. And he was certainly one of the leaders. Yeah. But he was like a rock star in Daytona and stuff. He'd be walking down the hall and there'd be this big cluster of people just walking behind him. You know, he was like a rock star.
Yeah, his entourage. You know, even like the Ralph Davises back in the day, there was like, I admired these guys. Like I admired you, like, you know, just seeing you guys in public. I was even too afraid to even have these conversations. And, you know, even when I started podcasting, you know, this is my selfish way of having conversations with breeders I never had a chance to have conversations with.
Yeah. Well, it's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, you guys have a lot to give in the hobby, more than most people. You know, there is a real passion with the new generation, but you know, the stories you guys have are unlike any other stories, and where I can repeat the story and maybe make some mistakes because it's been passed through 5 or 6 people before it got to me. It's just really nice hearing it from the guy who did it in the first place.
Well, I say I'm blessed to have the run I've had. You know, and not only with reptiles, but a wife that put up with me being a reptile man for 46, 47 years, you know, and let me do my thing. And a couple of wonderful kids, grandchildren. I'm just so blessed. Yeah.
Oh, and for sure, man. And man, so here's the thing. Like, I almost feel like we're saying goodbye right now, and it wasn't necessarily the plan.
No, I got time. Whatever.
All right, we'll keep going a little longer. You know, it was a touchy moment. I like to, I'm a hype man. I like to really tell people things they need to hear. I don't think people pay people compliments enough in life anymore, you know?
Yeah.
But here's a question, and this is a personal question. Were you a football player? Did you play a little in school, or was that a rumor?
No, I did not. I did play football in high school. My coach and I did not get along at all. And I can't stand to have someone poking their finger in my chest. Okay. And it was that kind of relationship. And so I quit, but I played basketball pretty well in high school. You know, I started for several years, you know, first only won the letter when I was in, you know, like 9th grade or something. And, you know, I was taller than average, and I really liked the basketball. But that was it. You know, no college for me. I just needed to be a reptile man, you know, and that was my life.
No, respect. Like I said, I've been all in since I've known about it. I don't think there's been a day that's gone by where something reptile related hasn't happened in that day. You know, I don't really know what else I would do in life if I wasn't a reptile guy, to be honest with you, because where, yes, I could do factory work, and yes, I catch on with certain things. This is the only thing that's really ever been fluent in my life.
Yeah. I've done so many things in you know, getting through to be a full-time reptile person, and then building things for myself. You know, like my big building I had. You know, I built it. I had them come out and put up the structure, and then I did all the electrical, all the plumbing, all the walls, you know, put in the bathroom. I mean, I'm just capable, and, you know, just pretty handy.
Jack of all trades.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a huge thing. Not that I want to talk about me, because I really want to keep talking about you. So we're going to jump into some boas, but like, you know, doing factory work, and like the one factory I worked at, I was doing injection molding, the same swamp coolers you had in your video, we had in there to keep the employees cool. But, you know, we went from a 5,000 square foot to 40,000, and I got to run the electrical. I got to paint the floors. I got to paint the walls. I got to move the machinery. And all that really did translate into what I'm doing in reptiles, to where when I have to do big things, where I have to take on big responsibilities with the collection, like I learned that from other trades. So, you know, not everything always has to be reptile. Yes. But Scoro Boa, man. You know, we brought this up last time, and like the Scoro is such a relevant project still. You know, we didn't get to hear anything you said because it was just a bad connection. You made that big investment, and we talked a little bit about just the neurological stuff you discovered early on that you didn't know about. But you want to tell me the story again about you picking up your first Scorias and just what that was for your final hurrah?
Well, I had a real close friend, Tip Powers from Virginia, And he was one of the very first to produce albino boas. We got acquainted at the reptile shows in Florida, and he ended up getting involved with me on a couple different projects. He was involved with the blood boas. He didn't keep boas anymore, but he would invest in some certain things with me. And we heard about these boas from I think it was North Dakota. I think I was from North Dakota. And he contacted him and wanted to see if we could buy him. And we ended up making a deal. And we wanted to get them all so we could capture the project and no one else have any, of course. And so we bought these boas from him. And I believe there was like maybe 8. I don't remember the exact number because we sent a couple back that had the head screw really bad. We thought it was IBD, but anyway, we paid 20 grand a piece for them. And the reason I could do that is because I was selling expensive snakes and I could use that money and with his investment also. So we got these boas and I just fell in love with them and started raising them. And ended up the very first one. I bred a bloody salmon to a scoria, and we only got a few scorias, and one of them was a bloody scoria, and it's just so hard to remember everything. But anyway, I got I got a scoria heifer blood, okay, and which my buddy Phil has, and that was so exciting. And then that was the first crack at breeding any. And then the next year, I was fortunate to get 2 litters, one real small litter and one with I don't know, maybe a dozen or so. I had Bill Love come and photograph them for me, and that was just right when I was starting to wrap things up and thinking about retiring, and so I sold all the good ones. There's a couple I put down because of the head thing, but I can maybe just show you real quick here. Let's see, take me just a second. Hang on here.
Okay. And while you're looking for that,
Go ahead.
I don't think I've ever seen a blood scoria boa produced to date. Like for you to make.
So Phil that got that has not produced any yet. Phil, he bought a lot of really nice animals from me. In his life, he's been maintaining these animals, but his life has been so involved with all these other things, his business and everything else. He just hasn't been able to devote the time to his boa collection, and he's kind of missed the boat on. I
wouldn't say it's completely missed because it still hasn't been done.
So let's see.
Yes.
These animals here are. Does that show up very good for you?
Yeah, we can see that just fine.
Okay. These are the matriarchs and patriarchs.
Wow, that's a really nice one.
That started.
Okay. Oh, sorry, buddy. Interesting.
Anyway.
You can see it okay, man. Yeah, that one was exceptional. The color on that.
Some of them had that really good color and striped tails. I love the black border on the cream. The cream border around the black. But that was special, boy. I tell you what. And I hope that project can go a long ways. What I really like to see is people just producing really nice, good colored Scoro Boas. Don't screw it up with something else. Just make gorgeous Scoro Boas.
The single gene Scoria, when it comes to all boa mutations, in my opinion, is probably one of the more unique boa mutations that we have. There's really nothing like that changes the pattern and color in that way. And I know we can get some reduced pattern, but
sure.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Great dog. Yeah.
Great dog. Yeah, he just showed up one day. We kept him.
Yeah. Well, he's loving it.
But yeah, no, he's a good boy. Tell me some other boa projects that you came across that really were like you couldn't believe you have the opportunity to work with them. Like I know that we talked about Seboge a little bit last time.
Yeah, that was a fun, real special. I was blessed to get in on that. Again through Louis Porras and Quetzal Dwyer. Quetzal had that park in Reptilandia and in Costa Rica, and I was able to get a nice little group of animals from him, and and that was they didn't have the great colors, but they really had a good, interesting look, and they're a different boa, were very laterally compressed and very arboreal, and the Pearl Island Boa, yeah. So that was a fun project.
Yeah. Like I said, I remember when you first put them on your website. I could be wrong, but were you asking maybe like $2,500 each when you first produced them?
No, I can't remember, but I think it was more than that. I just can't remember. A gentleman bought some from me named Barry out in California. I can't remember his last name. Great guy.
It's funny. I know Barry because my 3 invoices that I kept from my 3 first purchases was you, Tom Burke for a lipstick albino, and I bought 3 salmon posset albinos from Barry.
Yeah, what was his last name?
I could run and grab the invoice. I was trying to remember that before coming in here, but some reason it slipped my mind.
But he was a great guy, and he ended up getting some the very first, and they were pretty pricey, but I just can't recollect how much they were. But cool project. I wish someone was, I hear there's still a few around, but be cool if someone kept that thing going. But they come from the island, but I don't think you can go to the island and collect them. I don't know what the I don't know what the rules are now on the island, but they're pretty common on the island.
I was actually Googling a little bit before we came on here, and I found a little write-up that Vin Russo did where I believe he talked about, was it 2004 or 2005 you might have got your stock in?
I wouldn't be able to, I can't remember that.
I think he was talking about the CITES paperwork, and I think he might have worked through Bushmaster.
Okay, so I was able to provide a CITES with them. So if anybody has a copy of that, they'll have the date on it. I probably have some in the archives here. But I got them in the country legally, and they were pure Seboges. They weren't, from Toboga. They were, pure as they could get.
Yeah, and you can find them in the industry still, but like I said, Vin and you were 2 guys that knew their lineage, and I know other people working with it if they got it directly from Vin or got it directly from you. I think I went on MORPH Market today, and somebody actually said original stock parents from you for the babies they were selling today. Yeah. So if it wasn't you or Vin, I just don't think those projects would exist in the United States right now.
Yeah, and I don't know what the laws are on the island now. If
we got them here. It doesn't matter. Anything in the past is the past. If something changed, thank God we do have some lineage. So you get to herp anymore? Like, get out and do some road cruising or anything?
Well, I make it down to Chiricahuas a couple times a year. to hang out with Gordon and Bob, and you know, we definitely do a little road cruising, but I've got really bad knees, and I'm going to have them replaced. I just can't go climbing in the mountains anymore. So still love to see a snake on the road, though. I'm a little slow at jumping out. But
you got to take younger people with you to do it for you. They can
exactly
wrangle it.
Yeah, exactly. But
you know,
I am fortunate.
Yeah, you mentioned herping in Missouri. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I'm fortunate that for a retirement job, I get to go work for 3-4 hours in the morning, come and go as I please, and work with some really amazing animals. We've gotten animals in that I've never seen before in my entire life. There's stuff coming in now from different islands and every nook and cranny on the planet, you know. And so I'm pretty fortunate to still be messing with a lot of cool stuff.
You know, when you brought up Wumas, you know, that's a species that has been worked with in the United States for a long time. But like, you know, you've probably noticed in your clutches, they're extremely variable. You have some with faded backs, you have some with high contrast, some you get those beautiful lime greens on the side.
Yeah.
Are you guys at all starting to take like some of these unique characteristics in the Wuma and trying to like focus on breeding them back together to make them better or anything like that?
No, so I work for Christian as a Predators reptile store, and pretty much everything we produce just is sold either online or at the retail store. We get a new project and I grow them up, but we really we're not in the situation of holdbacks and growing them up type thing. You know, we just haven't done that.
Nothing wrong with that. I think it's a very underutilized species just because, again, there's so much variability in just the normals. Sure. I feel like if somebody, well, when they're done biting you the first year, they're really great snakes, but I don't like getting bit. I'll be honest.
No, I don't get bit anymore.
I don't get bit either. Yeah.
I mean,
but
once you've been doing it long enough, you don't get bit anymore.
No, the girlfriend gets bit all the time. And I always tell her, if you don't want to get bit, you don't have to get bit.
Yeah. It's like an electrician working with electricity. After he's got shocked a few times, he kind of learns how to not get shocked, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, you've worked with so many species. Do you have any on your bucket list that you'd still like a chance to work with? Maybe breed?
Well, I'm right now, my bucket list is I've been raising some import white lips and pythons, and they're ready. I got them together right now, and I'm really, really excited about that. And I always thought, ever since the old days, when I was first going to Florida, there was a gentleman down there that was, he was line breeding and yellowtail Crebos. And he had yellowtail Crebos that were 10 and 11 feet long, just big, solid, oh man, and golden, like 3/4 of their body, just golden. And I always said to myself, man, that's a cool project. So I've been working with a pair, and I'm hoping in the springtime that we'll have some success with those. I've never bred ring pythons. I've been raising a trio of ring pythons, and they're about 3.5 feet long now. So that's something for down the road. I don't know if there's something I'm just really craving. I raised Bolins, and I had great success with courtship and raising from hatchlings and big, nice, awesome, tame animals. I never got any eggs. And I know they have to get them cold. And the further I went into it, I knew I was just always gun shy to get animals like that too cold. And, you know, my building would get down to 70 at night. And obviously it just wasn't cold enough for her to cycle. And I really feel bummed out about that.
I've done one Bolen's episode with a father and son from Germany. Hans is their last name, which is a pretty typical name. But they were talking about how they would like open up the window in that room at night, and I believe they were saying it would drop down to almost 50 degrees in there. And you know, I remember Bolen's being offered to me like back in the early 2000s for around like $1,200, but I remember we kept them exactly like we kept everything else. You know, there was a fear of getting an animal that cold, especially for a python. So
I know.
it's
that was my problem.
Yeah, and that really seems to be key. If you don't get them that cold, they're just not going to go. And I think in the United States at the moment, there's at least 4, maybe. Honestly, I think I only know of 4 people, maybe, and it might be 3, that have actually been successful with Bolen's. But I believe that in the next few years, we'll probably start seeing more now that we have an understanding of how to actually breed them. Ari has written a lot on that. He's done some research in the wild on it. We've come a long way with that species, but it took us over 20 years to figure it out.
Yeah. Ari, he found eggs hatching in the wild.
Yeah. Was it on like a hillside, maybe? Because I know some of the...
I'm not certain, but anyway, he went over there quite a bit, and he actually found some babies hatching in the wild. But I know California, that someone out there, they're breeding them, and they keep them outdoors. You know, and there's some things just need to get cold. I know Tom Crutchfield, he diamond pythons. You know, he set them up outside. And they get cold at night and they're bask in the daytime and success. So, you know, we know reptiles are temperature related. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? And if things aren't kept properly, it's just not going to work. And I was always just too afraid to take an animal that valuable and get it too cold. So I was not successful with those.
No, 100%. Like I said, we kept them like every other python until somebody did the research to tell us not to do it that way anymore.
Yeah. And I really didn't have a place, you know, I mean, I guess I could have tried to create something or put them in my garage or something. But anyway, I was not successful.
No. And so did you breed anacondas successfully?
No, I did not. And that's something that I'm ashamed to say it. I raised, her name was Annie, and I raised Annie up to 18 feet, totally tame, big girl. And I bought a male about, maybe about a 9 or 10 foot male. And I would introduce him and stuff, and just never saw any courtship or anything, you know. And now I remember one year she swelled up like, oh man, I thought for sure she was going to have babies, but she just swelled up, developing ovum, and then reabsorbed. And after about 3 or 4 years, I found out that my male was a female.
Oh,
I never checked it. I bought it as a male, and what an idiot. One of my biggest mistakes I ever made. So then I retired, and so
we've made that mistake. A lot of people have made the mistake of not sexing something just because we trust. You know, I made the mistake early on. I think we've all been there. That's a tough way to find out, though. You know, the profile picture you have on Facebook is you holding that big female. I was going to use that for the thumbnail for this podcast, but anacondas are beautiful.
She was great.
Well, how about this, sir? You know, like I said, we're going to keep this at 2 hours today, but you know, this was the first one for you, and I appreciate you taking a chance and coming out here and doing this with us. I know Warren talked you into it, but you know, in the future, like I really enjoy the older conversations, the older hobby. You know, I'd love to bring anybody on with you in the future if you just want to sit back, and honestly, I'll probably just listen to you guys talk the whole time. But no, hopefully this isn't a one and done for you, man. I would love to do this again in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I was, I've never done one before. I'm just, like I say, obviously you learned I'm not very computer literate. And it's so stressful getting this up and running. I apologize for the other day, but I'm so glad my daughter came out over and got me squared away. But she had me squared away, so all I had to do is push a button, and the last time we did it would come up to that studio. Then I had to, at the last minute, I found out I got to go to a different studio. So I was over just panicking, retyping the oh my God. But anyway, it worked.
Yeah, no, I have Krista in the background. She's been helping with the images this whole time. I need help with this kind of stuff. I don't know how to do it. I love the conversations, but the tech side of this has never been for me. Up until recently, there's this weird buzzing sound or crackling in my voice. I bought a brand new phone and it was putting out a horrible product. I found an old phone laying around the house and hooked it up to Wi-Fi, and that's how I'm doing it today. So make it work with what you got. But honestly, it's more about the conversation. It's more about it sounding crisp. Honestly, I think this was a unbelievable 2 hours. Like I said, I've wanted to do this podcast with you since I started doing podcasting. So, I really do appreciate you again coming out and, just talking today.
So I've got a question for you. So if someone wants to see this, what do they do?
So we're going to be releasing this episode on Friday night. So tomorrow. So this is our pre-record. What I'll do is when we get done today, as soon as the link for the podcast is sent over to me, I can email it to you, or I'll have Warren get it to you. And then you can send it to anybody you want. It'll be up on YouTube with the video from this podcast. I'll be posting in all the BOA groups on Facebook. I'm going to make sure this one gets out there. The last couple of podcasts I've done, I've name dropped you saying you were coming up. So I've had people in the comments saying, what's going on with Rich Ihle? When are you going to do a Rich Ihle podcast? There's people excited to hear from you. So I'll get you everything.
That's cool. And so your other podcast, if I want to see some of your other podcasts, how do I do that?
I will find some old work. I can send you my Bob Applegate because you have a relationship with him, but I've jumped around a little bit, but this is my new home on the Trap Talk Network. I do something every other Friday. I try to keep it fresh, change it up, but I used to do one called, Herp House Rock used to be my original podcast with a couple good friends. I've got some pretty good conversations on there. The quality of the video isn't as good as this. I was doing it from like my car or at an abandoned bowling alley for fun. But, there were some great conversations, and I'm sure there's a couple in there you would enjoy. But, like I said, honestly, this meant a lot to me. I really appreciate you coming out and talking to me, and we're going to do this again.
Yeah, well, I'm honored you asked me, and you do a great job of visiting. Like to see you in person one of these days and have a beer with you and shake your hand. So I'm that guy at 3:00 in the morning looking for a beer at Daytona every year. So me and you would get along really well. Yeah, right. There you go.
But I will make a trip. I've always wanted to get out to Bob's place. It's been on my bucket list, but like I said, it's been hard to find time just with the collection. But this upcoming year, very hard. The animals come first and my happiness comes second. But love the work. Always been happy doing this, and I'll be doing it hopefully all my life. I don't think I'll ever shut it off.
That's great.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Honored you invited me. Thank you.
No, thank you again. Hey, sir, if you want to get off that little X on the bottom, you're more than welcome. If you want to say goodbye before you do, and I will see you in the future.
All right. Take care, Herpers.
Thank you again, bud. Hey guys, I always appreciate everybody who puts time into watching these. Like I said, that was a good one. Always wanted to talk to that gentleman. So we're going to do some more of those, hopefully this upcoming year. Love you guys. Thank you again.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Dave Levinson Reptile Podcast, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, drop a comment. Let me know what you like best out of this episode. Be ready for that next Dave Levinson Reptile Podcast.